Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 2 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 78 and 13 with this deck, so I've obviously been grinding a ton with it, mainly just because I wanted to get back to rank 1, but I just wasn't able to get there, so big props to whoever's at rank 1 right now. But anyway, as you can see, the deck's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, it'll have the full deck list there that you can import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Rakdos Hourglass Reanimator deck in Alchemy. So I recently returned to Alchemy before the new set came out, and I was just trying a bunch of different ideas out, and unsurprisingly just quickly came to the conclusion that you're at a pretty big disadvantage if you're not running a deck with 4 Fable, 4 Crucius. So my focus then just shifted to try and find the most powerful shell that runs 4 Fable, 4 Crucius, ideally something that just goes bigger than all the other mid-range decks, and this is the list that I came up with. So as the name suggests, this is a Reanimator deck, so we're trying to cheat big creatures into play, and the reanimation targets that we've got here are Atraxa, Grand Unifier, and Hourglass Coven. So Atraxa, obviously the best reanimation spell in the whole format. When it enters the battlefield, it basically just completely refuels your hand, which is great in the attrition grindy matchups like against the other mid-range decks. It either completely pulls you ahead or is very good at pulling you back from behind as well if the opponent started off well. And then the body is really good at stabilizing. You know, a 7/7 flying vigilance lifelink is basically impossible for an aggro deck to attack past, and then having vigilance means you can start swinging in with it to gain a bunch of life back. And additionally, even outside of aggro, a lot of the mid-range decks have very good reach in the late game right now because of stuff like Shielded, Invoke Despair, and Rusko. So Atraxa being able to connect just puts those games out of reach and makes sure the opponent can't drain you out anymore. And then we've also got Hourglass Coven. So in this particular list, I really wanted to maximize my chances of having a fast reanimation start. You know, reanimation to decks in Alchemy in the past have typically been mid-range decks that have a small reanimation package. If you look at the Vat of Rebirth deck or the Jund decks that are running Jarsil, they typically just have 4 reanimation spells and 4 reanimator targets. But in this deck, I really wanted to try and maximize the chances of getting these fast reanimator starts to pull you ahead against the grindy matchups, or get you to the board quickly against aggro. And so in this deck, we're running 7 reanimator targets and 7 reanimation spells to try and maximize those starts. So Hourglass Coven is the other target we've got here, and this is a really powerful card. It's a 3/3 that conjures 2 hags onto the battlefield, so you essentially get 9/9's worth of stats across 3 bodies, and the 2 hags, you know, the majority of these produce a continuous effect, which means if you can get them down early, they start generating you a ton of value really quickly. Now it might look a little bit weird that we're running 4 Coven, 3 Atraxa, when Atraxa is definitely the more powerful of the 2, but the main reason why I really like 4 Coven is just that it's really hard castable in this deck, particularly because we're creating treasures of Fable and Crucius. It's very easy for us to just hard cast this on turn 5, which is really important because one of the weaknesses of being more all-in on the reanimation side of things is that it makes the deck more vulnerable to stuff like Graveyard Hate and discard spells, so having 4 of your reanimator targets be very easily hard castable really helps to circumvent that a lot. Additionally, the Hourglass Coven is also, you know, even though Atraxa is better, when you're using Assemble from Parts, it does reduce 3/3's worth of stats off the Atraxa because it reanimates it as a 4/4, whereas it's actually a buff with the Hourglass Coven, so when you're using Assemble from Parts, it is a little bit closer between the 2, and additionally, you know, it's better against Invoke Despair because you split your threats across 3 bodies, and also enables us to pivot more easily against aggro that I'll get to when I move to the sideboard. So I've been really liking the 4/3 split so far. So those are the reanimation targets. Next up, we'll have a look at the ways we have of getting them into the graveyard. So first we've got Bloodtithe Harvester, which creates a blood token on the end of the battlefield trigger. The blood token allows us to loot these into the graveyard, and it allows us to do it at instant speed, which is really nice because it enables us to play more easily around sorcery speed Graveyard Hate like Graveyard Trespasser and Corpse Appraiser, which is really nice. Then outside of that, it's just a 3/2 body, which is really good at starting to apply pressure, or is just a good blocker against aggro as well. And it's also a flexible removal option as well. You know, we can use it to take out early opposing creatures, and it also pairs very nicely with Reflection of Kiki Jiki, allowing us to copy it every single turn as an additional removal spell. So Bloodtithe Harvester provides a ton of utility. Then we've got Fable as another discard outlet. So Chapter 1, making the 2/2 that creates treasures when it attacks, is really strong. The treasures in this deck are really great because it enables us to cast Cruelty of Gix on turn 4, and like I said, enables us to hard cast our reanimation targets. You know, Hourglass Coven very easy to cast on turn 5 off Fable, and we can also potentially hard cast Atraxa. Now it is obviously trickier because we need 3 treasures to do it, but it is possible, so treasures are always going to be useful. Plus we have a ton of mana sinks in the deck, you know, particularly if we're reanimating an Atraxa. Having treasures lying around enables us to deploy threats that we get off the Atraxa while still having mana to interact with the opponent during their turn off stuff like Go for the Throat and a Braid as well. And then Chapter 2, the looting, just generally good at helping us dig to what we need, but it's just another discard outlet for us to get our reanimation targets in the graveyard, which is really great. And then Reflection of of Kiki-Jiki is just a really strong late game engine. You know, like I said, very good with Bloodtithe Harvester at getting us a reanimation, getting us a removal spell every single turn. And then we can also use it to copy the Hags off Hourglass Coven to get even more value there. And we can also use it to copy Soul of Phyrexia off Phyrexian Scrapyard, which is really nice as well. And then we've also got 4 copies of Grixis, so if you've played Alchemy at all, you know how powerful this card is. Definitely the best card in the whole format right now. And basically just completely fixes your hand whilst also ramping you, and is particularly nice in this deck because it's another discard outlet for our Hourglass Coven and Atraxa. So, you know, being able to pick a direction to get your Seek also means that we can more consistently find stuff like Cruelty of Gix and our reanimation targets, which is really nice. And just in general, you know how powerful Grixis is if you've played Alchemy, and it works really nicely in this shell because of the reanimation package. And then in addition to that, we've also got Phyrexian Scrapyard. So this is one of the biggest reasons to stick in black-red, in my opinion. You know, you could consider going Jund for Jarsil or Grixis for counter spells, but I just don't really feel like it's worth it. I'm already struggling to fit everything in just red-black, and sticking to red-black enables us to run Phyrexian Scrapyard, and having a discard outlet on a land is so powerful, particularly because it's instant speed. So similar to Bloodtithe Harvester, we can use this to pitch our reanimation targets into the graveyard at instant speed to avoid stuff like Corpse Appraiser and Graveyard Trespasser, and it also provides you a mana sink if you flood out, because you can, you know, cash in 3 lands to get this huge creature on the battlefield. I've had a lot of situations where I have, you know, it's like a board stall. I have a very wide board and so does the opponent. Neither player can attack. And then if you can get the Soul of Phyrexia out, you can then just swing in with everything and just give your whole board indestructible. So no matter how the opponent blocks, all of your creatures survive. And then, like I said, also can copy it with Reflection of Kiki-Jiki. So Scrapyard in this deck is such a powerful option just to give us a more, you know, a higher density of discard outlets. Now, you can't really afford to run more than 2 because we do want to have, you know, you're going to run into issues where you don't have both colours of mana in some situations, but 2 has felt like the perfect amount for this, and I really, really like this addition to the deck overall. So these are the discard outlets. Next, we'll have a look at the ways we have of reanimating these creatures. So first of all, we've got Assemble from Parts. Now, this is definitely the best reanimation option in the whole format, just because it's a mana cheaper than everything else, right? Every other reanimation card in the whole format is 5 mana. Assemble from Parts is 4 mana. And we can also split it over multiple turns because it's an instant. It being an instant also enables us to play around Sorcery Speed Graveyard Hate. So we can go like Bloodtithe Harvester on turn 2, then pass to the opponent, and then at the end of the opponent's turn, we can use the blood token to loot an Hourglass Coven or Atraxa into the graveyard and target it for Assemble from Parts to bring back on the following turn, which is really strong. And the other really nice thing about it is it also shuffles the copy back into the deck that has the perpetual reanimation ability. So it enables you to do stuff like if we pitch Atraxa and get it back with Assemble from Parts, off the Atraxa trigger, we can potentially find the Atraxa that we've modified with Assemble from Parts, which then means we can pick it, put it into our hand, and then discard it, and then we have it straight in the graveyard to reanimate immediately without even needing a reanimation spell. So, and then obviously if we end up drawing, you know, an Hourglass Coven that we've used with Assemble from Parts, we can reanimate it again. So really great because it's just cheaper than everything else, and we can get a bonus off it if we draw the card that we've shuffled back. And we've also got 3 copies of Cruelty of Gix as another reanimation spell. You know, like I said, all the other Reanimator options in the format are 5 mana, and this is definitely the best of the bunch. So it's a saga with read ahead, which means that we can skip straight to any of the chapters, which is really important because it means we can just go straight to chapter 3 to reanimate a creature, which is particularly important against Invoke Despair decks. Invoke Despair is one of the most format-defining cards right now, particularly from the mid-range decks, and being able to just go straight to chapter 3 ensures that we can get the reanimation without getting blown out by Invoke Despair. You know, against the mid-range decks, it is kind of risky to go chapter 1 or 2 on the risk that the opponent has an Invoke Despair, and they can force you to sacrifice this before you get the reanimation. But so skipping straight to chapter 3 is very important in a lot of situations, but the other 2 chapters do provide a lot of utility as well. So chapter 1 makes the opponent discard whatever their best creature or planeswalker is, which is a really big tempo play. You know, particularly if you don't have a reanimation target in the graveyard, being able to cast Cruelty of Gix, make the opponent discard whatever their biggest creature is really nice, because chapter 3 of this can reanimate a creature from either player's graveyard. So like I said, if you don't have a reanimation target of your own, you can use chapter 1 to make the opponent discard like a Shieldred or a Rusko, for example, and then just reanimate that off chapter 3. Also, there can be some situations where the opponent has your graveyard on lock, and you can use chapter 3 to get back something from their graveyard, which is really nice. And then chapter 2, essentially giving you a tutor effect for anything in your deck, is really powerful. Now, I don't have any one-offs in the main deck just because I didn't really feel like it was worth it. You know, the majority of the time you use chapter 2 to find an Atraxa if you have another discard outlet. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't work with Fable, because if you have chapter 3 of Cruelty of Gix going off the same turn as chapter 2 of Fable, you can't loot the card into the graveyard and then reanimate it with Cruelty of Gix, because you need to pick a target when the trigger goes on the stack. But it does work with Crucius, Bloodtithe Harvester, and Scrapyard. So if you got Crucius, you can go Chapter 2, grab an Atraxa, pitch it to Crucius at your end step, and then just reanimate it off Chapter 3. And if you got Bloodtithe Harvester or a Scrapyard, you can go Chapter 2, tutor an Atraxa, and then either at the end of the opponent's turn or at the beginning of your turn at your upkeep before your draw step, you can just use a blood token or a Phyrexian Scrapyard to pitch Atraxa to the graveyard and then reanimate it. So Chapter 2 is most of the time gonna find you an Atraxa or an Hourglass Coven, but if you've already got a Reanimator target, you can use it to find removal if you need, which is particularly important against a card like Shielded, for example. And if you have everything else you need, you can just use it to find a Crucius to fix your hand. So I haven't really felt like the one-ofs are that necessary. If I was going to run one-ofs in the main deck to tutor, first of all would be Brotherhood's End. There have been a few games, particularly against a deck like Goblins, where being able to tutor Brotherhood's End would be quite nice. And then the other option is maybe a discard spell, so you could potentially go Cruelty of Gix Chapter 2 to get a Duress or a Break Expectations, and then use that to get rid of an opponent's Invoke Despair. But the Brotherhood's End and the Duress situation has only really come up 3 or 4 times, and I'm not really sure what you would cut from the main deck to make room for a one-off, really. I think a Braid is probably the closest one, but if you replace a Braid with a Brotherhood's End or a Duress, I think over the course of multiple games, you're going to get more problems from the opponent having a Crucius and you having a Brotherhood's End or a Duress that you can't kill before it triggers. So I haven't really felt like it's worth running the one-offs in the main deck, to be honest, and like I said, I don't really think it's too necessary. But overall, Cruelty of Gix, definitely the best reanimation spell to run in additional from Assemble from Parts, and just provides you with a ton of value, and also enables you to bring back Atraxa as a full 7/7, which is really nice. And then outside of that, we've also got a couple of pieces of interaction. We've got Full Go for the Throat, which is just the best black removal spell in the whole format. Basically being able to kill everything. There are a few artifact creatures that see play, but for the most part, this just basically kills everything. It is very, very important to be able to kill Crucius before it triggers. In these mid-range mirror matches, being able to have 2-mana interaction to kill Crucius before it gets to its first trigger is so important. And that's also the reason why I'm running 4 copies of a Braid as well. A Braid just a generally good removal spell as well. Now, it is slightly weaker than Go for the Throat because it can't kill bigger creatures like Shieldred, but I really, really wanted to maximize my chances of having at least one of these in my opening hand to be able to kill opposing Cruciuses or 2/2s off Fable, because, even on the draw, if the opponent taps out for a Crucius or Fable, being able to kill their 2/2 or Crucius and then play your own Fable or Crucius is a really big, it puts you in such a big advantage. In addition, a Braid is just generically nice as well because it can kill artifacts. Being able to kill Midnight Clock against Rusco is very important. Being able to kill Oni-Cult Anvils against the Anvil deck is really important. And the other really nice thing about a Braid is that it kills the 2 most commonly played Graveyard Hate in the format. The only, the main 2 pieces of Graveyard Hate that see play are Unlicensed Hearse and Viconia, and a Braid being able to take out both of those is really nice. It means that we barely have to sideboard at all in the mid-range mirror matches, because having 4 Braid in the main decks means that we already have good outs to Graveyard Hate as well, which is really nice. And then in terms of the mana base, like I said, 26 lands has felt really important overall. We really need to have our 3rd land on curve for Fable or Crucius. In every game, missing a 3rd land is an absolute disaster. And then we also obviously need, 4 or 5 mana for Cruelty of Gix, and then we oftentimes want to be hard casting Hourglass Coven as well. So I definitely don't think you want to go below 26 lands in this deck. Then in terms of the actual lands themselves, like I said, Phyrexian Scrapyard, best utility land you can run in this deck. And then we've just got the good Black-Red Dual lands, Sockenzan Takanuma as one-ofs, and then some basics. The main card that I'm not running that's notable is Forsaken Crossroads, and I definitely think you could run Crossroads in this deck if you wanted to, but I feel like you don't really need the extra fixing. With the dual lands and the basics we're running right now, we don't need double colours until Cruelty of Gix on turn 4 or 5. We don't even need black or red until turn 2. I guess if you're bringing Cut Down, you need black on turn 1, but the pressure on the colours really isn't that much, so I don't really feel like we need the extra fixing. And I prefer not running Crossroads here because I really value all of our lands entering play untapped. Even if we're on the play, obviously, Blackleaf Cliffs is going to enter tap later, Haunted Ridge is going to enter tapped later in the game, but I just don't really, having your 3rd land enter play tapped if you're on the play and you can't play a Fable or Crucius is just kind of a disaster. So I don't feel Crossroads is really needed in this list, and I also really wanted all of my lands to enter play untapped wherever possible. So that's the reason, but you could run Crossroads if you wanted to, basically. So that's the main deck. I've been really happy with it overall. I think running a more heavy reanimation package basically means that you maximize your fast starts, which helps you maximize your chances of pulling ahead against the mid-range decks and committing to the battlefield quickly to stabilize you against aggro. And because Hourglass Coven is also very hard castable, you're not as vulnerable to a lot of the Reanimator hate that's commonly seen. So now moving on to the sideboard, we got 4 copies of Cut Down and 2 copies of Brotherhood's End for the aggro matchup. So Cut Down really important as 1 mana interaction, gives us something to do on turn 1 and helps us, stabilize against aggro, particularly if we're on the draw, which is really important. And then Brotherhood's End is a sweeper, very good. The 2 most commonly played aggro decks in the format are Mono Red Aggro and Mono Red Goblins, and Brotherhood's End is really good at stabilizing you in those matchups. The ability to destroy all artifacts is also very relevant against the Oni-Cart Anvil decks as well. So against aggro, the way I typically sideboard is I'll cut the Cruelty of Gix and the Atraxa and bring in the 4 Cut Down and 2 Brotherhood's End. The main reason I cut these 2 cards is Atraxa is a bit of a liability post sideboard against these aggro decks because of Traumatic Prank. If you're relying on Atraxa to stabilize and the opponent has a Traumatic Prank, that can often just single-handedly lose you the game. So even though Atraxa is very good at stabilizing, Traumatic Prank can be a complete blowout, so I want to cut it there. And then Cruelty of Gix is just a little bit too slow and clunky in the matchup. You never really want to go through Chapter 2 because the losing 3 life isn't optional. You always have to take that. So against the red decks, that's very, risky to do. And like I said, 5 mana is a bit clunky for this sort of effect. So against aggro, we basically cut these for extra removal and kind of board into more of a controlling mid-range deck that still has Assemble from Parts and Hourglass Coven. Coven is also just really, really good at stabilizing you in those matchups because it goes across multiple bodies, provides you blockers, can provide you, ways to gain life as well, which is really nice. Then we've also got 3 copies of Unlicensed Hearse for Graveyard Hate, so this is important against other Reanimator decks and, Oracle of the Alpha, Infinite Turns decks, just any deck that's abusing the graveyard. Now, 3 might seem a bit excessive because Unlicensed Hearse is pretty bad in multiples, but we have so many ways to loot it away off Crucius, Fable, Bloodtithe Harvester, and Scrapyard that drawing this in multiples really isn't that bad. And you also really want to maximize your chances of finding that first copy, so 3 has felt like a good amount there. And we've also got 4 discard spells, so we've got 3 copies of Duress, 1 Break Expectations here, which is very good at against the control matchups. Basically, we typically board out of Go for the Throat and Abrade, or some combination of the 2. I typically like keeping Abrade in because it deals with Unlicensed Hearse, which is really relevant against a lot of those matchups, but having discard spells is just very good in those matchups. The reason I've gone for a split here is that I like having 1 copy of Break Expectations to be able to tutor off Cruelty of Gix. If you do need a discard spell in any given spot, being able to tutor for a Break Expectations basically guarantees that you're not going to whiff off it. If the opponent is running creatures, being able to use this to get rid of a Shieldred, for example, is really nice. And then we've also got, Brotherhood's End for the aggro matchups, like I said. Single copy of Invoke Despair is here as another tutor target to get off Cruelty of Gix if the opponent's running Planeswalkers, particularly Tasha. Tasha is very good against our deck, and this is definitely a card you need to be wary of when you're playing the Grixis mid-range matchup. If you're thinking the opponent could have a Tasha, you want to try and set up a situation where you're not stranded with only an Hourglass Coven or an Atraxa in the graveyard if possible. Sometimes you won't be able to do that, and you just got to hope they don't have it, but definitely be wary of this card. But even outside of the -2, you do need to be very wary of situations where the opponent can +1 this and just get towards the ultimate, because we're not that great at committing to the board in the early game unless we have a fast reanimation. And so the opponent just plussing and getting to the ultimate, if they do get to the ultimate, them getting Hourglass Coven or Attraction play is really bad. So if the opponent does get Tasha and starts plussing it, being able to go Cruelty of Gix straight to Chapter 2 to get Invoke Despair and kill the Tasha is very important. Also, obviously very good at killing enchantments and stuff as well, and just a generically good card as well. So but predominantly this is here for Planeswalkers. And then finally we've got a single copy of Titan of Industry. So this is just an alternative reanimation target to bring in, mainly against stuff like Oni-Cart Anvil, which is a matchup where you want to be able to kill their artifacts and enchantments and also gain life immediately, which is really nice, but is also very good against enchantments. Black-red in general doesn't have great ways to deal with enchantments, so having Titan of Industry as a one-off here is really nice. Now, as you watch the gameplay that I've got coming up in a bit, you might notice that I've got slightly different sideboards. So I initially started out, because I've been mixing, trying different stuff out and tweaking numbers in the sideboard. I initially started with 3 Titan of Industry in the sideboard as kind of a pivot card, but having played with the deck some more, I realised that you don't really need more than 1 copy because you can just tutor it up off the Cruelty of Gix. So that's the deck overall. Like I said, it's felt really good to me. I really like having a high density of a reanimation package. I think it plays super well with the best cards in the format because they discard as part of their effects. So it enables you to set up your reanimation more easily, enables super fast starts, and also because Hourglass Coven is hardcastable and you have 4 Braid in the main deck, you're not even really that vulnerable to hate pieces either. So like I said, deck's been performing really well. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments. Next up, I've just got some gameplay with the deck so you guys can see it in action. So I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, so we're going second here. And I can't keep this, obviously, way too many lands, so I have to ship this one back. And even though we don't have any threats here, I think this is a fine keep because early interaction is good against basically every deck, right? It's great against aggro. Even against the mid-range decks, you need to have early interaction to be able to kill Crucius and stuff, so even though we don't have any like actual threats yet, we have plenty of draw steps to find them. Okay, so opponents on Rakdos. Oh, interesting, they're on Goblins. So I assume the Black Splash is probably for Crucius, if I had to guess. I've been running a Crucius Goblins deck myself, and it is pretty good in the shell. So I'm going to set a stop during the main phase 2 so that we can kill Horde Master before their end step, so that if they exile a Goblin off it, they have one less turn cycle to play it. Because if we wait until their end step, they have until the end of the next turn to play it. Okay, so they play a Squee, so unfortunately we have to take out the Squee here. Otherwise, we just risk them getting, you know, multiple bodies into play for free. Let's hope they don't exile the Goblin off the trigger here. They do. They hit, what do you call it? Trap Finder, which is a little bit annoying. So just going to ship it back here. Again, we've got plenty of removal here, so we should be able to keep them off the board in the early game, and then just hope to draw something like, you know, a Crucius, a Fable, or, you know, if we hit the 5th land, even a Cruelty of Gix can be pretty good here. But yeah, we'll see what the opponent does. Okay, they attack first. So, I mean, I'm probably going to want to kill this Horde Master anyway. And I don't think there's anything they could cast main phase 2 that would want me, you know, maybe if they cast like a Squee main phase 2, we might want to kill that. But, okay, Influx Array, I mean, there's nothing we could have done about that anyway. If we were playing a counterspell deck, then there's definitely obviously an argument to waiting if we had a Make Disappear or something. But we have no way to kill Influx Array game 1, so we've just got to basically ignore it, and we can just go over the top of it fairly easily, right? If we can find a way to ditch and animate this Atraxa, that's a way we can fairly easily beat the Influx Array, because it is quite a slow engine. You know, if I was running more of a regular mid-range deck, it would be more of a concern, although I guess we'd also be running Invoke Despair then, so... Okay, so they get Fable in play. Definitely going to kill the 2-2 before it can start generating treasures here, so... Going to use the Abrade rather than the Go for the Throat. I mean, I don't think it really makes a difference in this matchup because Abrade kills basically everything anyway. I don't think there's a Goblin that outscales Abrade. Oh, interesting. Okay, Cruelty of Gix is pretty nice. So if we can find a discard outlet, well, I guess we can just get a discard outlet off Chapter 2 here, right? So we get to see what's in their hand. And I think we have to take Battlecry Goblin. That's the best card in their deck by far. Giving them Crucius is a little bit annoying, but we do have the Go for the Throat for it. Whereas if we give them the Battlecry Goblin, there's a chance they can just play it and activate it immediately, which is pretty scary. But yeah, we can now go Chapter 2, find a discard outlet, and then reanimate Atraxa, which is pretty nice. Okay, so they discard Strangle in the land. I assume they cast the Crucius here while the shields are down, which is going to get them a trigger, which is a little bit annoying, but we do have Go for the Throat to kill it before it gets the second treasure, which is pretty important. And it's interesting to note that the Battlecry Goblin they got was off the Influx Array, so I imagine they've still got 4 left in their main deck. Okay, opponent did order their triggers correctly, so they get the creature off the Influx Array before the Crucius trigger. Interesting to see what they discard here. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely, if we don't draw a discard outlet for the turn, we're definitely going to try and find a discard outlet for the Atraxa here. Okay, they go for Fable. Okay, Assemble from Parts is interesting. So we could go Crucius here, or we could go Blood Tithe Harvester. Now, Crucius is risky if they have an instant speed removal spell, but I very much doubt they're running many instant speed removal spells, considering we've already seen Strangle. Right, Goblins in general is a very high synergy creature deck, and if their removal spell of choice is going to be Strangle, I very much doubt they're running Lightning Strike or Go for the Throat. That's my logic. If I thought they could potentially have a Go for the Throat or a Braid, then tutoring a Blood Tithe Harvester to pitch the Atraxa is a lot safer there. Additionally, if I thought the opponent was going to be playing any sorcery speed graveyard hate like Trespasser or Corpse Appraiser, then I'd want to use the Harvester instead to get the instant speed. Discard it to the blood token, but against goblins, I don't really think it's much of an issue, to be honest. Okay, so I think we can wait. We're definitely going to use the go for... Well, I mean, there is an argument to using go for the throat on the reflection here, but I think killing Crucius is more important. So yeah, I think we want to use go for the throat on the Crucius here, although we do need to kill reflection. Reflection will run away with the game, but as long as we hit another removal spell off the Attractor, I don't think it really matters. So, oh wait, no, that was a mistake. Okay, I'm so used to Goblin Morale Sergeant only being used with other goblins that I forgot they could enlist the Crucius. So I should have killed the Crucius before combat. I was going to wait until their main phase 2 to do it. So that's a problem. I think just to save damage, I have to block with the Crucius here. I mean, I don't think blocking with the Crucius is that bad anyway. I mean, actually, I guess they could have just enlisted the Reckless Ringleader. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a mistake on my part. I absolutely should have used Go for the Throat on the Crucius beforehand. I mean, if I was planning to block with the Crucius anyway, I don't think it really matters, but I wasn't really planning to do that, so... Yeah, that was definitely a mistake on my part. Should have killed the Crucius beforehand. I just forgot that the Morale Sergeant could enlist a non-goblin. Okay, another Cruelty of Gix is interesting. We're definitely going to get back a Traxxas here, and we're really hoping to hit another Abrade or Go for the Throat to kill the Reflection. Okay, we hit an Abrade. That's very important. So we definitely want the Hourglass Coven, because we've already got an Atraxa in play, and we can potentially hardcast it as well. And so killing Reflection before it untaps is definitely something that I need to be doing here. So I think that's the first priority. We'll just kill Reflection now, and then we could either go for Bloodtithe Harvester. Well, I mean, actually, we still have enough money to go for Cruelty of Gix, but I don't know if we have the best target for it right now. We could just get the opponent's Crucius, but I think I'm just going to go for Chapter 1 to get rid of the Crucius that we know is in their hand. Or, they've been getting goblins off the Influx Array, so even if they didn't have the Crucius in hand, we could have just snagged another goblin. Now, we do have to take 3 damage off the Cruelty of Gix, but we know what their hand is. As long as they don't top deck a Battlecry Goblin here, I think we're good, because it's basically impossible for them to attack in here. So they play the War Chief, and then next turn we can... this is kind of a spot where I wouldn't mind having Brotherhood's End in the main deck, but it's barely ever come up outside of that, so I assume they're kind of in a bad position here, where if they attack, we gain 7 life back off the Atraxa, and if they don't attack, then we're just going to be swinging the lifelink race back in our favour anyway, so... Interesting decision what we go off Chapter 2 of Cruelty of Gix here, because we already have the Hourglass Coven in hand. I mean, we're definitely going to block the Squee here. That does enable them to recast it main phase 2, but I think I just want to prevent as much damage as possible here. I guess we could have blocked the Beetle Black Chief, but there's a possibility that if they do... Oh, they choose not to cast the Squee here. Interesting, okay. So I'm happy with how we blocked there then. So, interesting what we want to get off the Chapter 2 here. Number of good options. We could just go for another removal spell. We could go for a Crucius potentially. Because, I mean, the main thing we're worried about here is Battlecry Goblin, and Go for the Throat isn't even that clean an answer, but I think I'm still going to take it just in case they hit like a Goblin Chieftain off the Influx Array, for example. And because of that, I don't really want to just jam the Hourglass Coven for 6 mana. We could go Harvester, pitch it, and then assemble from parts of the Coven. I kind of want to hold up Go for the Throat, but I think I'm just going to jam the Coven here, and then we can block with it and potentially reanimate it. If Go for the Throat could kill Battlecry Goblin before... Hold on, so I just want to think about this. I think the mill is good enough against the Squee that I'll go for that, and Hag of Scythe and Breath gaining us some life back is going to be huge. But yeah, if Go for the Throat could deal with Battlecry Goblin before it activated, then I definitely think holding open Go for the Throat is good here, because that's the only real card I think can save them in this spot. Okay, so they do cast the Squee from the graveyard, makes sense. Oh no, they found the Battlecry Goblin. So I think we might just be dead here then. Yikes. I think one more turn if they hadn't hit that Battlecry Goblin, because that's one that they hit off the Influx Array, unfortunately. So If we'd been able to dodge it for one turn, I think we just put the game completely out of reach there. But I think, I'm not going to calculate it, but I'm pretty sure we're dead here. Battlecry Goblin, when your board is that wide, provides so much damage. Yeah. So that was kind of rough. I think one more turn and we would have been stable there. Right, if we can get another connection in with the track, so we're good. So we definitely want the extra interaction here. Cut down on Brotherhood's End is really good in this matchup. And then, interesting, I usually keep in the Harvester and trim the Attraction and the Cruelty of Gix, but I don't know. Atraxa felt very, they feel like they're running a slightly more grindy version. If they weren't running, so normally against Mono Red Goblins, I cut Atraxa and I cut Cruelty of Gix and just run more of a controlling mid-range deck. Atraxa I don't like to keep in because of Traumatic Prank generally. But since the opponent is running Crucius, it looks like their build is much more mid-range grindy focused, and Atraxa seems like it's going to be important at stabilizing there. If they weren't running Crucius, then I think it's correct to cut the Atraxa because I think they're more likely to be mono red. They're more likely to have Traumatic Prank, but since they're in black, I think there's a decent likelihood they're running Go for the Throat. That's what I do in my Rakdos Goblins build. Now, I'm not 100% sure this is the correct way to sideboard. Like I said, against most aggro decks, I'm cutting Atraxa and cutting Cruelty of Gix. So, if I play this matchup more, that could still be the correct way to sideboard in this matchup. But we saw last game how important Atraxa is. And like I said, since they're in Rakdos, I think they're more incentivized to run black removal in the sideboard than Traumatic Prank. So that's my logic anyway. Not 100% sure if it's right. We'll have to see how it plays out. And if we win this but it doesn't feel great, I could very easily see cutting Cruelty and cutting Atraxa. And Bloodtithe Harvester is also not great here because, it is good in general, but you would rather hold open removal in this matchup than, commit a Bloodtithe Harvester to the board, I think. You're generally playing a control role in this matchup. So this hand is, I'm not sure I'd keep this on the draw, but on the play, I think this is fine, right? We don't have any early interaction, and we don't have anything until turn 3, but the opponent, the best they can do is just play like a Battlecry Goblin on turn 2, and then we can just play a Crucius of our own. We have tons of ways to filter our hand. We have the best 2 cards in the format, the best 2 cards in the deck. We can pitch Atraxa straight away, so then if we find an Assemble from Parts or a Cruelty of Gix, we can just reanimate it straight away, So yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out. So opponent considering their mulligan here. Unless they disconnected, maybe. Okay, sweet. So, going to run out the Haunted Ridge taps here. And then we'll see what the opponent leads on. Okay, nothing on turn 1. So again, this is a slow hand on our part, but I think it's fine to keep on the draw. I'm going to set stops just to make it look like we have interaction here. Okay, so generally, my rule about, whether to play Crucius or Fable first is if the opponent has mana available, then I'll go for Fable first, just in case they have removal. If the opponent's tapped out, I think Crucius is generally the better option. Now we have Assemble from Parts, so we can just immediately reanimate Atraxa on turn 4, which is going to be really hard for them to beat, I think. Again, they probably have either Go for the Throat or Traumatic Prank here, but if they don't immediately have either of those, I think they're really going to struggle here. So now we can just assemble the Atraxa here. So yeah, if we do see Traumatic Prank, I definitely think I'm interested in cutting the Atraxas post-sideboard, or, if it goes to game 3. So I think I'm going to go for another Atraxa here, because if they do have a way to kill it, we get to discard the hand size anyway, so we can just pitch this Atraxa. I don't think Goblins is going to be able to beat an Atraxa that's just on the board, even if it's just a 4/4. And so they basically have to kill this Atraxa, or they're probably not going to be able to fight through. Okay, they do have Go for the Throat, so I am actually pretty happy with how I sideboarded here. The main reason why I cut Atraxa in these sorts of matchups is because of Traumatic Prank. Additionally, specifically against the very low-to-the-ground aggressive decks, I do think Atraxa can be too slow in certain situations. At least Hourglass Coven, you can hardcast it if you don't have a way to reanimate it, but this build, Goblins is generally more grindy. I think against mono red Goblins, I would just, sideboard by cutting Atraxa anyway. But against these more grindy versions, like I've said, I think it's probably correct to keep Atraxa and Cruelty of Gix in, especially now we've seen Go for the Throat. So opponent obviously discarded the black cards there because they don't have any black mana yet, which is obviously very good for us. Viconia is a good card against us. Even though we have an answer, it can be problematic if we don't. And also, you know, Go for the Throat, killing this Atraxa could be an issue. I mean, again, we have the second Assemble from Parts. We already have the Atraxa in the graveyard, so I'm not too concerned, really. And I feel we're in a really sick spot now. Okay, so opponent's Fable flips. Let's see what else they've got. But yeah, we should be in a good spot. I could potentially see an argument to just casting out the second Fable here, but I do want to kill either the Horde... You know, I'd rather have Go for the Throat open to kill the Horde Master if they make a greedy attack. And we also do want to kill their Reflection before it can start getting value as well. So I think it's important to hold open Go for the Throat here. But again, I could see an argument to running out the second Fable last turn as well. So yeah, we'll see what the opponent has here. Wow, they're attacking. Interesting. I mean, I'm happy to just snap off a block here. Gains us some more life. If they have an Abrade or something like that, I'm not really concerned because we have that second Assemble from Parts. And they do get a trigger off the Horde Master, but again, I'm really not too concerned about it. I feel we're in a really good spot. Okay, they do have Influx Array, sure. Okay, and the Trap Finder and a Fusing, okay. So I think I'm just going to Assemble from Parts another Atraxa here, you know, because there's a chance that we might want to do that straight away to refuel, and it just saves us mana on a later turn. Now again, that could be a bit greedy if they do have Viconia, but they don't even have the third mana here. So here we could actually just go for Brotherhood's End. The Atraxa that we've got survives it, so I think I don't mind that. And then, you know, we get rid of their whole board. They do get a ton of Horde Master triggers, but we already have Go for the Throat available. We can always use the Atraxa in the graveyard to dig for more interaction if we need it. So this will give them a ton of Horde Master triggers, but, you know, they only have 3 mana, so even if they hit multiple goblins, I don't think... I guess with the Influx Array, it reduces the cost of it. Wow, okay. Opponent got very, very unlucky there. But, I mean, we'll take it. So now I think I'm in a position where I don't really care what they've got, right? We've still got the Go for the Throat in hand. I just want to apply as much pressure on board as possible. Opponent's still stuck on 3 lands, so I think rather than playing reactively, it makes sense to just start turning the corner and trying to close this game out now, because as we saw last game, because of Battlecry Goblin, they do have a way to potentially go over the top. Speaking of which, there is a Battlecry Goblin. That is going to sacrifice itself at the beginning of the next end step, though. Okay, they do get a couple blockers in play, but I don't think that's great. Okay, I mean, that seems like a weird attack, right? We just gained the 4 life back immediately. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops up. So that was, you know, that was pretty unlucky. They missed land drops and then had all of their lands exiled by the Horde Master, but I think I'm happy with how I sideboarded, right? If I'd seen Traumatic Prank there instead of Go for the Throat, I think I'd probably want to bring the Harvesters back in, trim the top end of the deck and turn into more of a control deck, but like I said, I think this is going to be more of a grindy matchup, so I'm happy with how we sideboarded so far. But yeah, going into game 3 on the draw is going to be a little bit trickier. Okay, this hand's great though. We've got a Abrader's early interaction to hopefully clear the way for us to get Grixis down, get the Atraxa in the graveyard, and then hopefully dig towards a reanimation spell. Okay, sweet. Another Hourglass, well, another reanimation target's pretty nice as well. Gives us more fodder to discard to the Crucius. Okay, there's Battlecry Goblin. I'm just going to pass here, you know. Typically you want to kill Battlecry Goblin before it can activate, but this early in the game it can't really do much, so I'm not too concerned. So I think I'm going to take the 2 here in case they play like a Horde Master. I think I'd be more interested in killing. I think I'm more interested in killing the Battlecry Goblin at this point now, because going into turn 4, that's when they can potentially start abusing it. Okay, cut down is a sick draw now, because you know the downside of killing the Battlecry Goblin there is they can potentially attack with the 2/2 to get them a treasure to allow them to start ramping. You know, maybe play like a Goblin Influx Array into something else, but now, you know, kind of similar to Historic with Fatal Push, we can potentially just cut down this 2/2 here, stop them getting ahead on mana, which is pretty huge. Okay, they just got a Squee. See what else they've got here. Okay, they do have Go for the Throat, so I think we definitely do want to kill this 2/2 before it attacks, stop them getting a mana advantage here, because there's a very good chance they have a 3-drop in hand they want to cast. So we are, losing the Crucius is definitely an annoyance here, but if we can find any reanimation spell, we can just get back a Traxxas. And even if we don't, we could potentially just get to 6 mana and hardcast this Hourglass Coven as well. This is the big advantage of running Coven over something like Titan of Industry, in that if this was a Titan, it would just be a completely dead card in our hand, whereas since it's, very hard castable in this deck, it's not too much of an issue. Okay, so definitely going to use the Abrade to kill the Reflection here. You can't let Reflection untap in the Goblins deck because they can make really good use of that. They've got a lot of good things to copy. Okay. So not having a piece of interaction is a little bit rough. I'm going to set stops here just to not give away that we don't have anything here. I think it's important, especially at this point in the game, to represent interaction, but at least, we do have the 6th land to hardcast the Hourglass Coven, so as long as the opponent doesn't have anything too crazy here, we do have a decent shot of stabilizing, I think. Okay, they have a Squee. I mean, obviously there's some good stuff they can hit off the Influx Array as well, but my hope here is that Hourglass Coven can just buy us enough time to find a reanimation spell for the Attraction that's in our graveyard. Okay, there is a Fable, which is a little bit annoying, but Hourglass Coven making 3 bodies is going to be really important here, right? It's going to make things very difficult for the opponent to attack. Okay, so I think I'm more inclined to get the Siphon Breath just to, start swinging the lifelink race in our favour a little bit. And this is definitely a matchup where the Inner Weakness Hag is going to be really good as well. Can just kill all these 1/1s that they get off the Squee. If they have a Horde Master, we can just take it out immediately as well, which is really nice. And even if we can't kill any of their creatures, we can potentially reduce the power of Squee to stop it being able to attack into stuff freely. Okay, just checking which, whether Battlecry Goblins came from the Influx Array or their deck, which is important to note. Just to get a handle on how many they've got left in their library. Okay, they choose not to attack, so the Hag's putting in work here, just stabilizing us. So definitely going to take out the 1/1 here with the Hag of Inner Weakness, and then we start buffering our life total with the Siphon Breath Hag as well. Definitely going to hold on to this land just in case we draw Crucius. It's nice to have a land in hand to be able to discard for value, whereas we really don't want to discard this Go for the Throat. Plus, we're already at 6 mana, right? So we don't really need much more mana. It costs, the most expensive card in the deck, outside of a Traxxas, which is basically uncastable, is another Hourglass Coven, which we can already cast, so... Okay, opponent does have Ember Hauler, but they choose not to attack. I was going to say they could potentially attack and then try and kill what we block with, but... So I don't think it really matters what we pick with the Hag of Inner Weakness. Maybe it's better to pick Squee there, actually. Oh, sick. Okay, perfect. So we did find a reanimation spell. This was kind of my hope that the Coven would just stabilize us to give us time to find something like a Cruelty of Gix. Now we can just get back a Traxxas. And then this should be good, right? It's going to refuel us. Unless they have Go for the Throat, it's also going to swing the lifelink race back in our favor completely. We get Crucius, Fable, Go for the Throat, and Swamp. Maybe it's best to get a Braid there, actually, because there's a chance they run Unlicensed Curse, although we have seen Viconia, so maybe that was, a little bit greedy to not go for the Braid instead. Okay, another Influx Array, but, as you can see, we're just going way over the top of the Influx Array. Now, again, my main concern is Battlecry Goblin, but the Hag of Siphon Breath has just been gaining us enough life back where I don't think Battlecry Goblin is going to be good enough to stabilize them, especially because we have Go for the Throat in hand. Now they can use Ember Hauler and Firebrand to kill one of the Hags or the Hourglass Coven here. Looks like they're considering it. I can see them mousing over it. Okay, they take out the Hag of Inner Weakness, which makes sense. Because that is just going to kill the Firebrand otherwise. But they don't... I guess they have enough mana for Go for the Throat if they attack here. Okay, they choose not to. Again, I'm just going to save Go for the Throat for, Battlecry Goblin or a Lord effect like Horde Master or Goblin Chieftain, which they could get off the Influx Array. So now we just put them on a 2-turn clock, right? If they can't kill the Atraxa here, we just win next turn. And I can go Crucius and Fable. If they let me go to the end step, I can discard this land and still have access to Go for the Throat. It is face up, so the opponent knows we have it, but they're basically just forced to go for their play this turn. But again, even if they have a crazy turn with Battlecry Goblin, I don't think that's going to be good enough because we're at 28. We're basically guaranteed to gain 7 life back, so... Okay, there's an Instigator. But yeah, unless they have a Go for the Throat for a Traxxas, so they just have to go all out this turn. Okay, they do have Battlecry Goblin. So, I mean, I think the best thing is to just use the Battlecry use the Go for the Throat against the Battlecry Goblin here. Just trying to consider whether it's worth killing the War Chief, but I think it's better to just kill the Battlecry Goblin. So I assume, yeah, they go to combat first to try and get the Pack Tactics trigger. So they're forced to just activate the Battlecry Goblin now, which again, you know, since we're at 28, I just don't think it's going to be enough. Particularly because we get an extra 7 life back off the Atraxa here. Yeah, I mean, we're completely fine. We probably don't even need to block with everything here, but I might as well, right? They're completely tapped out. They're not going to be able to kill Atraxa with 1 mana. Actually, wait, that was probably a misplay on my part because they could have Strangle. I probably should have just blocked the 1/1 with Atraxa. Okay, it looks like they don't have it, but yeah, that was a misplay on my part. I should have just blocked the 1/1 in case they had Strangle there, but doesn't look like it mattered. Should just be able to close the game out here. Sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, this hand looks great. We've got, you know, Harvester on 2, into Fable on 3, and also a Braid as early interaction. So very happy to keep this one. So run out the Blackleaf Cliffs on turn 1. And since we're on the play, I think there's basically no drawback to running out Harvester on turn 2, which is really nice. Okay, Xander's down. So imagine we're against Grixis Midrange, if I had to guess. Now, if we only had a Crucius here and the opponent plays an untapped land, then I think it's very risky running out Crucius, but I think with Fable, it's not that much of an issue, especially because we have a Braid here. So the risk here is they could have a counterspell for it and then run out their own Crucius, but I'm not too worried about that because we can then go our own Crucius and also a Braid theirs. So even though they did have the Make Disappear there, I'm not too annoyed about that exchange because if they had tapped out for their own Crucius, we have a pretty good follow-up play. Now again, I think it's too risky to run out our Crucius here because if they counter it and then run out their own, we don't really have good counterplay to that. So I think I'm just going to pass here. Now it is a little bit risky if we miss our land drop, but we can just loot away this Atraxa and that gives us 2 looks at the next land, which is pretty important. So yeah, the early game against Grixis is pretty, you know, you do need to be very careful because if you run out of Crucius and it gets killed and then the opponent can resolve theirs, that leaves you in, you know, a lot of trouble. Wow, they just tap out during their phase. Again, maybe they're concerned that we're running Grixis and haven't found a blue land yet, but either way, we get to loot away the Atraxa here and then get to freely resolve our own Crucius here, which is pretty nice. So even though, you know, we do, you know, having a second Crucius when we've got the first one isn't, you know, they're legendary so you can't cast both, but the opponent is going to need to kill this Crucius or we're just going to run away with the game, and having a backup one is very nice. So I think I'm just going to loot away the Braid here. They do have Corpse Appraiser, so that does get rid of the Atraxa, but again, I'm not too worried about that, to be honest, because Atraxa is always worth discarding early. I mean, the other concern with discarding Atraxa early is if the opponent's running Tasha, that can be a blowout, but we already have the Harvester in the graveyard, so we don't really need to worry about that. And yeah, it's never really worth holding on to Atraxa unless you think you can realistically get to 3 treasures soon, and even then you need to be thinking about counterspells like Make Disappear. Okay, Hourglass Coven is a great draw. Opponent's tapped out of counterspells here, so we know we can just resolve it, which is huge. These aren't great options. I'm kind of tempted to go for the leftmost one just because the opponent's already down at 14, just to apply pressure to their loaf total. And then I like going for the Death's Legion against Invoke Despair decks here because the 1/1 basically provides insurance against Invoke Despair if they don't have it exactly this turn, right? We always have just a sacrifice fodder for the Invoke Despair. Cruelty of Gix is really nice. Now, like I said last turn, having a backup Crucius is pretty nice, but a Braid is very important as interaction in case the opponent has their own Crucius. And I think, you know, when you've already got a Crucius in play, I think I like keeping Fable rather than the second Crucius because we can actually run it out. You know, the second Crucius is only good if they have removal for the first one. Okay, opponent does have Rusco. Thankfully, we have the Braid to be able to take out the Midnight Clock here, which is pretty nice. Okay, the opponent does have another Corpse Appraiser here. And they exile the Crucius, sure. So Cruelty of Gix, not doing that much right now because we don't have that much great stuff in the graveyard, and it is still risky into an Invoke Despair, right? We don't have a Fable in play yet, so if we run out Cruelty of Gix on chapter 1 or 2 and they have an Invoke Despair, that's a little bit rough, but I could still see an argument to going chapter 1 here just to get rid of their most problematic card in their hand. Okay, interesting. They pitched an Otawara, so got a number of options here. You know, we could upbraid the Midnight Clock, we could upbraid the Rusco and then Cruelty of Gix it. I think I like going for Cruelty of Gix on chapter 1 here. You know, even if they do have an Invoke Despair, it's not the end of the world. Wow, we get rid of their Shielded, so that's huge. And now we can Crucius End Step and upbraid the Midnight Clock here. Again, we could also take out the Rusco, but I think the Midnight Clock is the main concern because that gives them a way to potentially get back in terms of card advantage. And I want to fire it off now, even though it does cost us the 2 treasures, just in case they draw a counterspell off the top. And now Rusco is going to be able to get them back. You know, it will drain us a bit to get us back on, you know, life totals. But I think this matchup, oh wow, they drew an Invoke Despair off the top. That's like the perfect draw for them. So that's a little bit rough. They did draw the perfect card, but I still think we're probably ahead, even though that happened, right? We've still got 2 Fables in hand. We've still got all the, you know, the Hags in play. If we draw another land, we can just deploy both Fables. So we didn't draw, well, we did draw a land, but it was obviously a tap land, so we can't play both, but I still think we're in a really good spot here. You know, we're high enough life total where we don't have to worry about Rusco draining us out. So even though the opponent did draw perfectly last turn, wow, and another Invoke Despair, okay. I mean, if they keep drawing Invoke Despairs every single turn, that is a way they can potentially win this game. And we are getting, you know, kind of low on life total now, which is a little bit concerning, but still think we've got a good shot here. Okay, so opponent can probably just afford to keep taking 3 now. They're getting some life back off the Rusco. Okay, we did draw an Assemble from parts, but we don't really have anything great in the graveyard right now. So I think I'm just going to attack with the Hourglass Coven. I mean, maybe that's a mistake because then that could potentially allow them to attack back the following turn. I mean, if they take a trade, I'm very happy with that. But it's kind of suspicious from the opponent's point of view, right? Although I guess they're at a low enough life total and we have a big enough board here where they might be forced to block. But I think we kind of have to attack now while the Viconia's shield's down. Okay, perfect. So now we can assemble from parts back the Hourglass Coven. You know, even though I think it's generally best to hold it back as a blocker, in general, I think it's important to go for that attack now while they don't have Viconia mana open, because that could just shut us off being able to do that for the rest of the game otherwise. So generally in this matchup, the Dark Duress is the best card, but the opponent's basically already empty-handed right now. So I think, you know, I just want to, you know, they can easily just deploy all their threats. So I think I just want to apply as much pressure to their life total as possible so we can keep making more 1/1s every single turn. And we can also, you know, force them to take 3 twice every turn or start sacrificing stuff. Okay, opponent has an Abrade as well, so they're still drawing quite well here, but we've got a pretty big board of Hags here that I think is going to be difficult for them to stop. Now, Viconia can potentially specialise and get them some good cards, but these Hags are going to start running away with the game pretty soon if they don't draw something really good. So they take 3. Wow, they take 3 twice. Interesting. So I think I'm just going to start applying a ton of pressure here, right? They're already down to 9. And this forces them to start blocking with a bunch of stuff. And then we can follow it up with another Hourglass Coven as well. So even though they can potentially like just block all the Hags to make us stop losing value, I think this is really important to just start applying pressure and closing the game out here. So this takes out all their creatures other than Viconia, puts them down to 2. And then I think I might as well run the land out here. We can actually run both out. So the only thing we're losing to here is Brotherhood's End, which I don't even know they're going to be running in the main deck. And then we'll keep the slightly bigger Hourglass Coven, because I think there's no way they're attacking with this Viconia here, right? They have to keep it back to block. Okay, we've got the Hag that drains them, so that's going to win the game, even if we don't attack next turn. And then I think we'll get the Scry one as well. And then, you know, again, Brotherhood's End is basically the only card they could draw to get them out of this, but we still have the 4/4 Hag, the 4/4 Hourglass Coven that survives that. So even if they do draw perfectly here, I don't think it's going to save them. So I might as well just deploy all my threats out, just in case they somehow draw a bunch of single target removal this turn. But yeah, I think we should just be guaranteed to win here, right? They can potentially specialize the Viconia, but I don't think there's any 2 cards in the graveyard, even if they happen to have a blue card in hand, that can save them here. Right, they need a removal spell for the Hag of Siphon Breath, and then enough blockers to not just get attacked down by everything. I mean, opponents obviously considering their options, but I can't think of a single card other than just like a hard board sweeper that they could have here. And Grixis basically never runs that outside of Brotherhood's End, which doesn't even get the job done here. So they pick a Assemble from parts. Maybe they could reanimate Shieldred, but that still doesn't... Or Rusco maybe, but again, that's still not really good enough here. Okay, so they go for Crucius, so they can potentially discard a blue card, get both, play Crucius, and then use the Crucius to try and dig for something. But even if they find an instant speed removal spell off the Crucius, that's nowhere near good enough. Alright, the best they could hope to find is like, you know, they cut down. They're only going to have 1 mana available here, and that, yeah. So we should just win this one. I was just trying to think if there's any out I'm not thinking of, but I don't think there is. Yeah, okay, sweet. We just win off the trigger here then. Sweet, nice. So that felt pretty good, you know. Even though the opponent did draw some pretty clutch Invoke Despairs, we still managed to get the job done there. And, you know, this could be a matchup where I want Invoke Despair in the mirror, but I think I'm going to wait until I see Tasha first. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe that was a bit too hasty. Maybe I'm supposed to bring an Invoke Despair. So typically, if I think the opponent might have Tasha, I cut an Atraxa for an Invoke Despair, because if the opponent has a Tasha, Atraxa is a card that we always want to discard because it's basically never hard castable unless we can get to the point where we have 3 treasures. And so running fewer Atraxas post sideboard lowers the chance of us discarding an Atraxa and then the opponent playing a Tasha and just going -2 to get it back immediately. And obviously Invoke Despair is very good at killing Tasha as well. It enables us to go Cruelty of Gix, Chapter 2, search for an Invoke Despair and then kill it if it's just ticking up, because if Tasha ever gets to the ultimate, we basically just lose the game. But from the stock list that I've seen at the moment, there's a lot of decks that aren't even running Tasha, so I think in general it's best to run it back, but maybe it's best to just trim an Atraxa for an Invoke Despair anyway, just on the chance they have a Tasha. And if this deck I'm playing does become more popular, I can definitely see Tasha becoming more popular, so maybe in future I might just always bring in Invoke Despair in this matchup anyway, right? It feels like it's, you know, a generally good card in the matchup anyway. So yeah, I probably should be boarding an Invoke Despair regardless, because it's often too late if you wait to see Tasha, particularly if they're just upticking it. So this hand is pretty good, right? We've got early interaction, we've got Fable, just got to hope we hit more lands. Okay, opponent taps out for their own Fable, so definitely going to fire off the Abrade here, and now, even though the opponent is on the play, us getting a Fable into play that's, you know, potentially unanswered here. If we can ramp off the 2/2 attack and we potentially go straight for a Cruelty of Gix, which is pretty nice, right? We could, in theory, discard Hourglass Coven, attack with the 2/2, Cruelty of Gix, and reanimate the Hourglass Coven straight away, which is a really nice line, but I think there's a chance the opponent kills the 2/2 here. And off Crucius, they now have mana for Make Disappear as well, which makes that line a lot more risky. I mean, either way, I still think I'm going to discard the Coven. You know, again, this is another spot where we could potentially get punished by Tasha, but my opinion on Tasha is that it's a card that you can play around if you have the luxury of doing so. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to just go for the Cruelty of Gix here, although, actually, I don't know. I think that was a slight misplay. If I'm going to go for a Braid, I should have Braid pre-combat. The fact the opponent didn't block with the Crucius, I mean, I was tempted to just jam the Cruelty of Gix and hope they don't have it, but the fact they weren't willing to block with the Crucius there makes me think that they must have a hand where they need the Crucius filtering. I mean, either way, that was a misplay from me. If I was planning to kill the Crucius, I should have done it before they had an option to block. And it was very risky to go for Cruelty of Gix there, but I think potentially getting an Hourglass Coven in play was good. I think on balance, I probably should have killed the Crucius before combat there. I think getting blown out by Make Disappear there is so brutal that it's probably not worth the risk. So what I should have done last turn is just kill the Crucius before they had an option to block. So I'm actually going to go for Cruelty of Gix on chapter 1 here, just because they've just used an Invoke Despair. They could very well have a second one, but since we have another Cruelty of Gix in hand, I really don't mind going for this. Typically, I think it's best to just go for Cruelty of Gix chapter 3, considering we have an Hourglass Coven in play, but my logic there was they've already used one Invoke Despair, so chance of them having a second is slightly lower. I mean, again, that's not the best logic in the world, because if they did happen to have a second one, we do kind of get blown out, but particularly if they have no creatures in hand. But now that they don't, we're going to pull so far ahead. I felt like it was slightly worth the risk to just try and guarantee that we close the game out a lot quicker, because we're already a game up. I know that's not great logic, because whether you're a game up or not shouldn't really dictate the plays you make, but... And, maybe... I don't know. I felt like it was just worth the risk there. So either way, we get to reanimate an Hourglass Coven. Definitely going to pick the opponent's one here, because then we still have ours in the graveyard to get if we find an Assemble from parts. And then I could see an argument to getting an Atraxa here, because we do have Bloodtithe Harvester in hand, but... we could play Bloodtithe Harvester, get an Atraxa and discard it, but I think I like just going for Crucius here, because we already have plenty of reanimation targets in the graveyard, right? We can get their Shieldred, we can get another Hourglass Coven if we need, so... I think I like just going Crucius here instead. Again, maybe that was greedy. Maybe I'm supposed to go for Atraxa, but the issue there is if they do draw another Invoke Despair, then that shuts us off getting any more value, right? Because if we go Atraxa, Bloodtithe Harvester, and then they go Invoke Despair, they get rid of our Cruelty of Gix, and then we kind of wasted the tutor a little bit, but... Either way, I feel like we're so far ahead now that it shouldn't really matter. I feel like we really pressed the advantage by going for chapter 1 there. Still not 100% sure it's right, but it definitely paid off in this game. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, very happy to keep this hand. This is a hand that is pretty risky if you're only running a 24 land deck. But because we're running 26 lands, I'm pretty confident that we'll keep hitting land drops at least till our third land. And we can obviously use the Harvester to try and dig for more lands as well. So, and then outside of that, we've got, early interaction as well. And Cruelty of Gix is really nice, even when we don't have a reanimation target, because we can go... either chapter 1 to get rid of the opponent's card and then reanimate that, or because we have the Bloodtithe Harvester here, we could potentially go Cruelty of Gix straight to chapter 2, tutor up an Atraxa, and then use the blood token off the Harvester to reanimate the Atraxa. Wow, okay, Recruitment Officer, interesting. So I think I'm going to run out the Harvester here just to trade with the Recruitment Officer, because that, Harvester is a card that is not going to as easily be able to take out bigger creatures as the game goes on. So I'd rather use the Harvester to trade with the Recruitment Officer and then save the Abrade and go for the Throat to deal with bigger creatures, if that makes sense. Plus, we want to get this blood token into play so that we open up the line of going Cruelty of Gix, Chapter 2, and then, reanimate the Atraxa. Okay, interesting. So opponents on Soldiers, which isn't a deck I see very often in Alchemy, but I'm not really sure why. I think the deck's actually really strong. And, we've also got some Alchemy-specific Soldier support cards that I think are really good as well. So, yeah, I'm surprised I don't see this deck more often, to be honest. So definitely going to let the Thalia attack first here. I want to wait until their end step to fire off a removal spell, because if we kill the Thalia here and they just have a second one, that's really bad for us. Denic is also a problem, because that does shut off our reanimation spells, but definitely need to kill the Thalia first, just to unlock our hand a little bit more. It makes... Cruelty of Gix castable on 5. Also makes Go for Throat castable for 2 mana. So I think we're definitely interested in killing the Denic here, because my ideal line is kill the Denic, Cruelty of Gix chapter 2 for Atraxa. Now that is potentially risky, because if they have a second Denic in hand, that can shut off our reanimation, which is pretty scary, but... we do have another Cruelty of Gix, so at worst we can go second Cruelty of Gix to find a removal spell. Wow, okay, Myron is scary, so we could potentially allow that to resolve and then save Go for the Throat for next turn. But, I don't know. I feel like if we can reanimate Atraxa, that's going to go way over the top of Myron. So again, this is risky, because if they have a second Denic, we're in real trouble here. But I think I'm just going to go straight to Chapter 2, get an Atraxa, and set a stop during my upkeep, loot the Atraxa into the graveyard to reanimate. Now again, we get blown out by Denic quite a lot here, but... I think it's our best line to win here, right? The alternative play there is either go for Chapter 1 of Cruelty of Gix, or let Denic survive, then go for the Throat Myro, but then the Denic in play is shutting off our Cruelty of Gix. So even though this play is vulnerable to them having a second Denic, like I've said, I think it's the highest upside play for sure here, at allowing us to win anyway. We don't want to give the Soldiers deck too much time. Wow, they do have 2 more Soldiers, so this does produce 2 tokens off the Myral, which is pretty scary, but at least we get to reanimate the Atraxa here, and hopefully we can find another removal spell. So we can loot away the Atraxa here before it gets to Chapter 3, and then, you know, like I said, if we can find a Go for the Throat here, that's going to be really good at stabilizing us. So we get Atraxa, and again, I don't think Soldiers are going to have, I guess, what sort of removal is Soldiers likely to run? They could potentially be running Fateful Absence or something like that. I mean, we did find the Go for the Throat, which is huge. So we can actually go Crucius, activate the Crucius, and then very important to set a stop during the end step here, because if we accidentally let this go to the opponent's turn, then we're not able to cast the Go for the Throat because of Myral's passive. So thankfully, get to take the Myral out here, which is huge. Now, the opponent does still have a big board, which is scary if they do have a removal spell for Atraxa, but typically, I don't think the Soldiers deck will have many main deck answers to Atraxa. I'm not 100% sure, though. We'll have to see. But I imagine, you know, post-sideboard, they could have... I guess they're not running enough basics for Ossification, but they probably have something like a Fateful Absence in this sideboard, I imagine. But, yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for them to win from this point, right? They're going to have to... Their only way of winning is attacking, and they really can't afford to attack into the Atraxa. If they don't attack him, we're just going to be gaining a bunch of life back off the Atraxa. Plus, we have Hourglass Coven in hand, which is going to completely stabilize us even further. Right, it just gums up the board even more, makes it harder for them to attack. So yeah, opponent's in the tank here. I mean, if that last card in their hand was a removal spell, I'm sure they would have just cast it already. So I think we're pretty safe from Atraxa being killed this turn, which is pretty important. But yeah, we'll see what they do. Okay, they cast Denic from the graveyard, which again, I guess that can block the Atraxa to slow down the rate we're killing them. But again, I think we're much more likely to win the long game. So I don't think anything they do here is really going to get them back into it. You know, again, unless they have a way to kill Atraxa. If they do, then that's a problem. But we're going to start getting a bunch of life back anyway, so definitely going to start swinging with the Atraxa here. We could potentially kill the Denic beforehand, but again, I don't think that really makes a difference. I'd much rather save my removal for in case they draw another impactful card. Just going to run out the Hourglass Coven. Now, we potentially didn't need to run out a land drop there, but I don't think it should really matter either way. Okay, not great options there. I mean, I don't mind getting the mill one while they have you know, potentially could have more Denics. So not great options there, but I don't think it really matters, to be honest. I think on this board state, the most important thing is just getting more creatures onto the board to stop them attacking, just in case they do have main deck ways to kill Atraxa here. So the Dark Duress, if they don't play all their cards out, is going to make them discard stuff. I mean, again, against Soldiers, I don't think that's really going to matter too much, because they typically can just run out anything they want to. Okay, there is Valiant Veteran, so we might get slightly punished for not holding open removal for this turn, but I still think getting Hourglass Coven into play is going to be the most important thing, because it just, you know, makes it so much more difficult for them to attack. Okay, so choosing where to put the counter here. Okay, they put it on the Siege Veteran, which is interesting. But yeah, again, opponent really doesn't have good attacks here, so... And we actually managed to force them to discard a card. It'd be interesting to see what they're holding on to here. Oh, it was a second Thalia, sure. Actually, I mean, I'm kind of tempted to kill the Denic here just to put them on a guaranteed 2-turn clock, so I probably should have killed the Denic before the Hag triggered, just to deny them that clue. Because I think I am pretty interested on killing the Denic, just to deny them an extra draw step, right? If we attack them here, they, you know, puts them down to... I guess it puts them down to 3 now. So if they don't find another blocker, then they're in real trouble. So I think, yeah, we will attack. We'll kill the Denic. Like I said, I should have killed the Denic before the Dark Duress Hag triggered, but I very rarely play against Denic, so I'm just not used to that interaction. But yeah, we get to kill the Denic. put them down to 3, and now they have 1 turn to find either a blocker with flying or reach, or just a removal spell for the Atraxa. Yeah, put them down to 3, and then, you know, again, we could go for Cruelty of Gix, but I think it's more important to hold open, go for the throat here. You know, being able to kill the Valiant Veteran should shut down any way they have potentially going for lethal. And yeah, like I said, I very much doubt they'll have many main deck ways to kill Atraxa, if any at all. Well, they fire up the Mishra's Foundry. I guess they're in a position here where they just have to go for an all-out attack and hope that we mess up somehow. You know, maybe they have like an extra way to boost their board in hand and hope that we just don't block or something like that. I mean, at this point, I don't even think I'm going to use the Go for the Throat on the Valiant Veteran, because we still survive here, even if we let it survive. Yeah, even if we don't kill the Valiant Veteran, we still survive here, I think, so we'll just block like this, still have way more than enough health. If they do have another creature post-sideboard or something, we can still kill it. Yeah, okay. I guess they could have Brutal Cathar, actually. I didn't think about that one. But yeah, we definitely want the extra interaction here. And I think Cruelty of Gix is just too slow. And then just going to trim on 2 Atraxas here. You know, having the 1 Atraxa isn't too bad, but we only have Assemble from Parts as Reanimation. So I think I like sideboarding like this. I have been considering running an extra cut down in the sideboard, so I might end up changing that just because, you know, we don't have anything to do on turn 1 in the main deck. Obviously, we have Assemble from Parts at 1 mana, but you can never cast that on turn 1, so yeah, I think if I face more aggro, I'm very tempted to go up to 4 cut down in the sideboard, probably instead of the second Titan of Industry, because that is a card that you know, is very useful against Anvil and stuff, but I haven't found myself boarding it in that often, and I think you probably don't need more than 1 anyway, because, you know, you can tutor it up off Cruelty of Gix. So the difference between the first and second copy, I don't think there's that much value to the second copy. So yeah, I could definitely see swapping out that second Titan of Industry for a 4th cut down, and then we can cleanly cut all the Atraxes and all the Cruelty of Gixes, which I think is particularly important against the red aggro decks, because, you know, against soldiers, Atraxa is actually fine. You know, I mean, not as good when we cut the Cruelty of Gix, obviously, because we only have 4 ways to reanimate it off the Assemble from Parts, but you know, especially against the red aggro decks, I think Atraxa is a bit of a liability against Traumatic Prank. So by running the 4th cut down, I could then have enough cards to completely board out the Atraxas and the Cruelty of Gixes, which seems pretty appealing. But yeah, that matchup felt pretty good overall. I mean, obviously, Thalia is a concern on the draw here in game 2. It could be an issue, but you know, we have so much removal. We've already got 4 Go for the Throat, 4 Braid. Then we've got the extra cut downs and Brotherhood's End from the sideboard. So I feel like we should have a pretty good time against aggro. And, you know, the Hourglass Coven is really good at stabilizing as well, as we saw last game. I mean, I guess Atraxa did most of the work, but Hourglass Coven is just very good against basically every deck in the format, other than Control, maybe. But Control is very rare to see right now, because it has a really bad matchup against Grixis, which is probably the best deck right now. You know, Control trying to beat Grixis is horrible, because they have main deck counter spells. They have tons of value creatures that if you ever let resolve will just run away with the game. They have, you know, additional discard spells post sideboard as well. So I think in the metagame right now, it's fine if you're running a deck or a strategy that is slightly weak to Control, just because it's not very popular at all. So this is a risky keep, obviously, because if we don't find red mana, then the only castable card in our hand is Cut Down, but I think it's worth the risk. Cut Down on turn 1 is going to be really good against them, and we have enough red sources, and we're running 26 lands. I think we're very likely to draw a red land by turn 3. I mean, again, this is obviously a risky keep, but turn 1 Cut Down is going to be really good at stabilizing. Even if we draw, like, you know, Phyrexian Scrapyard and a Coven, that's really good as well. Ooh, okay, Haunted Ridge is interesting. I think I'm going to run that out now. That doesn't mean that we can't cast Cut Down on turn 1, but if the opponent plays Thalia on turn 2, we wouldn't be able to anyway, and I think at least giving myself the option to go Harvester on 2 is worth it. Okay, there is the Thalia. So because Thalia can just trade with the Harvester in combat, I don't think it's worth running out the Harvester. I mean, there is maybe an argument to going Harvester because then we can use it to kill the Thalia here, but I think I'd like using Cut Down because then it opens up the possibility of going for Fable on turn 3. I mean, if they tap out here, I'm probably going to go for Crucius instead, but yeah, it's close. Maybe it's better to go for Harvester, not 100% sure, but I mean, I think it's so close that it shouldn't really make a difference. Okay, there is the Denic. I mean, we'll definitely take out the Thalia here for sure. And then I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to be going for Crucius here. And the nice thing about this deck is, you know, Denic can shut off our reanimation stuff, but post-sideboard against the aggro decks, we're typically boarding a lot out of that anyway, and we can very easily just win off Crucius, Fable, Bloodtithe Harvester, and like even just hard casting Hourglass Coven is really good. So the opponent boarding in Graveyard Hate from an aggro deck honestly doesn't even do that much against us. So I could see an argument to passing and using Go for the Throat on the Brutal Cathar to try and ambush them in combat, but I think that's probably just a bit too cute. I think it's much better killing the Brutal Cathar now just to get an extra Crucius trigger. So then we can discard a land, just continue fixing our hand. So, I mean, I know opponent mulliganed, but on the draw, this is, you know, I feel like we're already really far ahead. So, yeah, this feels really good. Like I was concerned going on the draw. I mean, I guess they didn't have a 1-drop. Their fastest starts of 1-drop into Thalia, into, like, you know, a powerful 3-drop are quite scary. But, you know, obviously when they don't have a 1-drop, things are a lot easier. Interesting. I mean, I'm not even sure if we discard anything. Our hand is pretty stacked already. I think I might just submit 0 here and then I think I'm going to attack with the 2-2 here. If they block with the frontliner, I'm definitely going to kill the Valiant Veteran in response. You know, blows them out in combat. And then we can, you know, cast a Fable or a Bloodtithe Harvester post combat. I think I'm going to go for the Fable here. You know, there is definitely an argument to keeping the Harvester around here. Actually, yeah, I think I'm just going to decline on the Crucius because Reflection's flipping, and I don't think they're really going to be able to develop too much to the board, and Bloodtithe Harvester with Reflection is just going to completely, you know, wipe out any chances they have of staying on the board, and Hourglass Coven is going to be really good at stabilizing us here as well. Okay, they attack with the Denic. I mean, that's good for us because we get to just freely attack to get treasures, which is nice. So then we get the Reflections, so we can then start copying Bloodtithe Harvester next turn, which is pretty huge. Definitely going to attack here, get the 2 treasures, and then we can just slam the Hourglass Coven, and then yeah, we can just start copying the Bloodtithe Harvester next turn, which is going to be really, really hard for them to beat. So we'll see what we get off the Coven here. I think the Scry is probably the best, and then yeah, creating a 1-1 has got to be good. Just extra blockers should be decent. I mean, again, I'm not really concerned about the opponent running us over here because we have so much board presence, but creating extra blockers definitely isn't going to be a bad thing in this matchup. Going to hold on to the Mountain here just in case we draw another Crucius, right? We definitely want to run out the Harvester, so if we draw Crucius, it's nice to have a land in hand just to immediately get value off. So it does go to Knight, so we can't as cleanly kill the Brutal Cathar here. I mean, we still can, but it's just going to cost us 3 life, which I think we can afford to at this point, right? We have so much on the board, and they don't really have good reach in the late game either. Their only way of dealing damage, as far as I'm aware, is attacking. So with this, you know, with a board this big, we should just be good to start, you know, killing their board, and we don't really care about the ward on the Brutal Cathar. If they have a removal spell for the Harvester, that could be a little bit annoying. I mean, we still have Go for the Throat. Cathar Commando. Wow, they're going after the blood token. Wow, okay. That's quite a desperate play from the opponent. I mean, it makes sense, but I think that just shows how far behind they are that they're having to do that. I mean, I still think I'm just going to use Go for the Throat here. Just want to get value off the Crucius. And again, we don't really care about the 3 life in this matchup when we have a board this big anyway. And then I think we can just start attacking here. I mean, I'm happy to attack. You know, now they're tapped out, I think I can attack with all of these. If they still had mana open, then I think it's risky attacking with either of the hags because they could kill the Hourglass Coven in response and then block with the Denick and gain 2 life back. But since they're tapped out, I think this is a fairly free attack. And now they're on the back foot. There's a chance they probably just can't attack anymore. So unless they have a sweeper here, which I very much doubt, we should just be good to win, I think. Okay, they unearth the frontliner. Yeah, they just go for an attack. I mean, I guess that gains them 3 life back, but I very much doubt that's going to do anything. I guess they feel like they have to do something here. Okay, now they run out of Thalia. I mean, we can just copy the Harvester, kill the Thalia, and go for lethal here. Okay, we'll scry some lines to the bottom. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. Sweet, we got there. Okay, so we're going first here. And I can't keep a 1-lander, unfortunately. Wow. Two 1-landers in a row in a 26-land deck is kind of rough. Definitely going to keep this, though. And, I think I'm going to put back the Cruelty here. And, you know, just hope that we find another Reanimation card. Okay, Fable's pretty nice at smoothing our draws out. I wanted to keep the Scrapyard as a way to discard a Traxxas, because I felt like... Oh, wow, we're against Esper Ascend. I felt like the way we could come back from a Multi 5 is getting an Atraxa trigger early. So if we'd found like an Assemble from Parts, for example, that could be really good. So I think we're just using the Scrapyard to pitch the Atraxa here. Right, we're not even close to hard casting it, so... Okay, so we play out the Sulphur Springs past the turn back. So yeah, this isn't looking good, right? We've only got to go for the Throat and Juggernaut, so we do need to draw quite well. I mean, thankfully Juggernaut can slow the opponent down a little bit here. Okay, I was going to, you know, definitely don't want to go for the Throat on Juggernaut Peddler in case they cast something like a Diviner of Fates or a Fiend post-combat. Wow, okay, they missed their 3rd land. That's huge. And we draw a Cruelty of Gix. Okay, that was a big turn, right? Because now we basically stop them attacking for this turn, unless they have a Rafine here. Okay, they do have a Rafine, so they do attack here, presumably. But we get an Atraxa back, and I think their only answer to Atraxa is Obscura Polymorphist, which some versions of the deck that I've seen aren't running that many. The version I was playing had 4 in the main deck, so you know there is a reasonable chance they do have access to it, but if they don't have one immediately, it's going to be really hard for them to ever attack for the rest of the game. So definitely just going to slam the Cruelty of Gix straight to Chapter 3, get back with Atraxa. And then we've already got 2 go for the Throats in hand, so as long as they don't immediately have the Polymorphist, I think it's going to be hard for them to win. So even though things looked pretty bad at the start, Atraxa can just get you back from behind fairly easily. And I'm going to go for another Assemble from Parts because... Actually, wait, no, that's probably a mistake. I probably should have gone for another removal spell there. My thought was if they have a way to kill Atraxa, then we have Assemble from Parts to get it back, but the only real way to interact with Atraxa... I guess Evangel does it as well, but their main way of killing Atraxa is Polymorphist, which exiles, so I think that was a mistake on my part. I probably should have got a removal spell instead of the Assemble from Parts. But I mean, if they have a Death Touch creature, or they have, you know, maybe they're running like a Destruction Kill spell in the main deck, kind of unlikely. I imagine they are running the Polymorphist, so that was probably a mistake on my part, but... Even though they get to tap down the Atraxa here, and we do take... Well, we'll see how much they discard yet, but we could take up to 6 damage here. We get to get 7 lifelinks straight back immediately. We also have the Crucius to run out. And I guess the Assemble from Parts isn't the worst, because if we end up blocking with the Crucius, we can always just get it back with Assemble. So it's not like Assemble is a completely dead card here. Okay, they do have a Juggernaut Peddler, so they could take Crucius here. So yeah, now I'm definitely regretting picking Assemble. Wow, okay, that's another good draw. So we'll attack with the Atraxa here. And then I think I'm just going to pass. I think it's really important to take the Rafine out. Now, I could very well see an argument to going for the Coven here just to clog up the ground, but I really don't want them to get Rafine triggers, especially if they have Ascend. I think the way... Oh, wow, they found the Polymorphist. Yikes. I was going to say, I think the way they win from this point is just getting a bigger send-off. So we're definitely going to take out the Rafine here. And then they do get to attack him with 3 creatures. I think we probably want to fire off the second Go for the Throat now, just to minimize the amount of damage we're taking here. And I think I'm going to take out the Informant because it's a slightly bigger creature and is also less of a blowout if they bring it back with Ascend. I mean, thankfully we do have the Coven, which can clog up the ground here. And we got the Scoured Thoughts. Okay, that's pretty huge. I mean, I think we need to get the 2-1 though. Okay, perfect. We hit a second one. So that was a really tough decision on the first option, whether we go for the Scoured Thoughts or the Inner Weakness Hag, because Scoured Thoughts shuts off the Ascend. Since they're stuck on mana, that's not really much of a concern. I felt like the Inner Weakness Hag is more important on this board state because we can use it to take out Sigardian Evangel, which is really nice. But because we managed to get a Scoured Thoughts off the second one, that is huge because now that basically just shuts off Ascend for the rest of the game, which is really, really important. I mean, again, it was quite a close decision on that first one, but I just felt since they're stuck on mana and their board presence is fairly big already, I felt like it's more important to get the Inner Weakness to take out the Evangel, and then any future X1s that they play, like Diviner of Fates or any more Evangels, we can just take out every turn off the Inner Weakness. But yeah, we got a nice hit off that second hag there. Locking off the graveyard is going to be very nice. Okay, there is a Diviner of Fates. So I assume they have to discard a non-land here, or we can just kill it with the Hag of Inner Weakness. I mean, the slight concern is I assume they just attack with... well, I guess they have to... They can't really attack with the 2/2s, but they can attack with both of the... yeah, they can attack with both of the 3-power creatures. And I mean, I guess the nice thing now that we have the Assemble from Parts is that we can block with the Hourglass Coven and just get it back with Assemble from Parts. So in a way, the slight misplay earlier is actually paying off for us. Now we get to exile their graveyard, which is huge. We don't have to worry about Ascend right now. And then definitely just going to go for the Hourglass Coven again. Now, I am a little bit concerned about my life total, but like Sigardian Evangel is a card I'm pretty scared of, but the more creatures we get in play, the more we can play around that. So what do we hit here? Okay. I think we want Scry 2, and then I think we want the Siphon Breath as well. You know, like I said, the life total is something I am a bit worried about here. So getting 2 life back off the Siphon Breath every single turn is really nice. And the Scry 2 is also going to be good at just ensuring that we don't draw dead for the rest of the game. Now again, I am concerned about Sigardian Evangel, but these hags are definitely clogging up the ground enough where we shouldn't have to worry about it too much, right? They can tap down 2 of our creatures. We still have pretty good blocks here. And I'm very glad we've got the Scoured Thoughts hag to just shut off Ascend. Wow, and they don't get the Inquisitor Captain trigger either because we've exiled so many of their creatures. Wow, okay, sick, we got there. I was really worried about that game in a lot of situations, especially on the multi-5, but we managed to get there in the end. So I think this is a matchup where we definitely want the Hearses and the Brotherhood's Ends and the cut downs. So cutting the Cruelty of Grixis here and the Atraxas as usual against the aggro decks. And I think I'm happy to just trim Assemble from Parts as well because, you know, Hourglass Coven is very hard castable. We don't really need to be reanimating that much in this matchup, I don't think. I think just early interaction, shutting off the graveyard, and just running a decent mid-range plan should be good in this matchup as well. So I'm going to run it back like that. We just want as much early interaction. We want to shut off their graveyard and then just have something to go over the top. Okay, this sounds pretty nice. We don't have any interaction, but we can lock off their graveyard. We've got Crucius and we've got Hourglass Coven. So, plus I don't really want to mulligan against the Juggernaut Peddler deck either. Okay, there is the Peddler. I mean, I assume they take Crucius here, right? Hearse is only really good against exactly Ascend, so I assume they can take the Crucius and then just hope that they can win on the board. Okay, interesting. I think I'm going to run out the Harvester here just to slow them down a bit. Now, they could have another Peddler taking away the Hearse, but I don't really mind that. Right, I'd rather just slow down their aggressive game plan, and I think I'm very tempted to take the trade here, but I think I'm going to wait in case they play a Diviner of Fates main phase 2. Right, Harvester being able to take out Diviner is really big. Okay, sweet. I'm glad I waited then. I mean, again, there is always the temptation to just block to save damage, especially on the draw, but Diviner is a card that can help them grind into the longer game, so I am glad I waited. Now we can take out the Diviner, which is pretty nice, and then can get the Hearse into play. You know, Hearse is a card where it can be a little slow if you get it into play later in the game, if they've already filled their graveyard up. But thankfully getting into play at this point in the game should mean that we should keep it to the point where their ascends are basically not going to get back anything. So attacking with the Peddler, we can run out the Juggernaut next turn as a blocker. Okay, they do have another Diviner, which is a little bit annoying. You know, like I said, we are kind of relying more on a mid-range game plan, so the Diviner can allow them to grind into longer games, but we have enough removal where I think we should be alright to take it out. So just want to make sure that we keep their graveyard free of creatures so their Ascend doesn't really do much, and then going to loot away a land here. Want to have the Juggernaut as a guaranteed play to the board next turn. Wow, okay. Both very good draws. I think I'm just going to snap off the Brotherhood's End here. You know, we could wait for them to develop to the board a little bit longer, but I think I would rather just fire it off now while we don't have to worry too much about other stuff. Plus, you know, if we wait and they play a Rafine, for example, then we're not really getting that much extra value off it. Okay, they do have an Inquisitor Captain and a Dennick. Okay, wait, well, hold on, I need to slow down. Dennick shuts off the Hearse, so we need to kill the Dennick first. So very clutch that we had the cut down here, or we wouldn't be able to use Hearse this turn. And now, thankfully, we can use Hearse to get rid of Dennick, and I think Peddler is probably the more threatening Ascend target, considering they're at 5 mana. Okay, nice. Now, Blackleaf Cliffs is usually a bit of an issue at this point in the game, but we can play it this turn, get a Juggernaut into play, and then we've got Hourglass Coven for next turn. Just got to hope to dodge Juggernaut Peddler for one turn. And I think we should be good, because, you know, you saw last game how good Hourglass Coven is at clogging up the board and stopping them from attacking. And then at this point, you know, the main thing we're worried about them going over the top is Ascend, and Hearse has their graveyard unlocked. So even though they have more cards than us, oh wow, I was going to say, even though they have more cards than us, I am fairly confident about this spot, but Guardian Evangelist is definitely the sort of card that can turn this game around for the opponent. We would... So now I kind of do regret going for Brotherhood's End a little bit early, but I think we would have been in trouble, you know. We would have just taken more damage earlier if we'd waited, and, you know, the opponent could very easily have just played something else and held on to the Evangel to recover after a sweeper if they're playing carefully as well. So I still think I was happy with the Brotherhood's End. Obviously, we would love to draw another one right now, but I mean, we can still play the Coven here as well, which should be good at helping stabilize us. So going to attack him with the Juggernaut because we have to, right? And then we can run out the Coven here, and hopefully we can hit the... Oh, wow, we hit the Inner Weakness one. That's perfect. And another one. Okay, sick. I mean, we are probably forced to block some of their creatures here, but we can at least crew the Hearse, right? I really don't want to block with the Inner Weakness Hags because they can take out an Evangel each, which is really nice. And Rafine's Informant, if they discard a land here, it can take that out as well. Wow, okay, they discard a land, so that's another creature that we can kill with the Hag of Inner Weakness. I mean, again, they could get us to the point where they force us to block with them, but we're really trying to avoid blocking with these Hags if possible. I mean, if they run out of Rafine or something, we might be forced to block with more. I imagine they attack with everything here. So we're definitely going to crew up the Hearse off one of the Hags here. And then I think I'm just going to block the Inquisitor Captain and one of the Evangels. We do take 6 down to 6, which is a little bit sketchy. We could be dead to another Evangel, but I don't think we can really afford to play around that at this point. Then we can still activate the Hearse here. I think we'll just take out the 2 Evangels, and then we get to use these Hags to take out both of the Evangels they've got into play, which is really huge. And we could corrupt the Hearse, but, you know, they've got 2 Evangels in the graveyard. I really don't want to risk them going for Ascend. So I think I'm just going to attack with the Juggernaut here. I don't want to risk trading the Hags. Okay, they block. So we're already putting them on the back foot, which is huge. And then we could start going for the Scrapyard, or we could go for the Takenuma here. I think I'm just going to pass, and then we can Takenuma, get back the Hourglass Coven, and then get another 2 Hags next turn, which is pretty sick. So, I mean, again, you could make the argument to crewing the Hearse last turn and attacking for more, but I'm very glad we didn't for this exact eventuality, right? If they'd had Ascend, they could have got an extra 2 3/3s in play. As things stand, so that was the exact reason why I didn't want to crew up the Hearse last turn. Even though it represented more damage, I'm very glad we didn't. Okay, sweet, we just got there. Nice. That felt really good. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, this hand looks good, right? We've got early interaction. We've got Fable that can help pitch this Attractor and hopefully dig us towards Reanimation spell as well. So let's see what the opponent's on here. They're on Grixis, so that's a bit annoying because if they pass with 2 mana open here and they have a Make Disappear, having Fable countered here is kind of really bad because then we don't have a way to ditch this Attractor. I mean, opponent is thinking about something. Maybe they have a Siphon. Oh, wow, they just tap out for Viconia. Okay, that's perfect. So now we can kill the Viconia, get rid of their graveyard hate, and then we're guaranteed to resolve this Fable here, which is obviously going to be really good at pitching this Attractor to the graveyard, and then, you know, hopefully digs us towards like a Cruelty of Gix or an Assemble from Parts to get an early Reanimation as well, which would be pretty sick. Okay, opponent has a Fable of their own, sure. So there's definitely an argument to looting 2 cards to try and dig towards a Cruelty of Gix or Assemble, but I think with a Fable here, you know, where we can generate treasures and a Crucius. Maybe... I was going to say we can potentially store up some of these treasures to hardcast this Hourglass Coven, but I mean, I guess when we were doing the loot off the Fable, we didn't know that we would hit a Crucius. My logic before we had the Crucius was all we need to do is find another land or attack again with the 2/2 and we can hardcast the Hourglass Coven, but since we drew a Crucius, I think it's just best to get it into play while the opponent's shields are down, right? If you can get that first Crucius trigger off, it's really big. So even though we don't have the Hourglass Coven in hand anymore, I still think I like this spot quite a lot. We have a removal spell for their Crucius, which is really nice, and we can also resolve this second Fable, so... Okay, they pick Expedient, which is nice. If they picked Ambitious, then I think we could assume safely that they would have an Invoke Despair. Okay, opponent has priority here. So, I mean, I guess that doesn't mean they have a Make Disappear. They could just have a removal spell of their own. But yeah, either way, I think we're in a pretty good spot here. We get to take out their Crucius, attack him with both of our creatures, and then, you know, potentially resolve a second Fable and get another Crucius trigger by pitching this land. So I like our spot here a lot. I think we've got out to a really good start. Now, being on the play was a part of that, but, you know, that's the other dynamic I was talking about where... if you can get your Crucius trigger, you know, if the opponent taps out on turn 2 and you can trigger your Crucius or your Fable, whatever, if you're the first person to get that uncontested, powerful 3-drop running, you pull ahead so quickly. And that's basically what happened in this game. I mean, you know, I'm not saying we're guaranteed to win by any stretch, but getting that early Fable down and starting attacking with the 2/2 or getting that early Crucius down and starting to get triggers really helps get you a foothold in the game. Okay, so opponent's Reflection transforms. I mean, they still got, you know, 3 cards in hand. They could very well have an Invoke Despair. Yeah, they do. Okay, so things are starting to shift back towards the opponent. I think we're going to prioritize saving the Crucius here. Now, we could have sacrificed the Reflection and kept the 2/2 around, but that would have given them an extra card, so I'm not really sure it's worth it. So the Scrapyard is potentially decent here, right? We can use it to start working towards the 6/6, but I think it's just much better to cash it in with the Crucius here. So we are in a spot where we have a lot of mana and just interaction. So if the opponent has another Invoke Despair, that could be pretty bad for us in this point. Okay, Rusko, I mean, not the best, but not as bad as Invoke Despair here. Thankfully, we have the Abrade to take out the Midnight Clock. And we have plenty of excess mana, so we don't really need to worry about Make Disappear. So definitely need to focus on taking out the Midnight Clock. That's the main way they can get back into this game. And also, you know, stifles their mana a little bit. If they do have a counter spell and we happen to draw a good card, then they no longer have blue mana available, which is pretty nice. Okay, a bit unfortunate, you know, if we'd drawn an Attractor or a Cruelty this turn, that would have been sick, but unfortunately didn't quite get there. I mean, thankfully we still have Go for the Throat, but I think the opponent is probably incentivized to start attacking with the Rusko, which can start, you know, dealing damage to us off their spells as well. I'm kind of tempted to go for the Throat the Rusko, but I feel like that's risky because if they have a Corpse Appraiser or a Bloodtithe Harvester, they can just start running away with the game off the Reflection. So I think we have to let it connect. But again, I am slightly worried now that our life total is getting low off the Rusko. I mean, definitely going to take out the Reflection now. We don't want them to start copying the 2/2. I think that was the right line, because if they had Corpse Appraiser or Harvester, we'd just get completely run over. Okay, so I'm going to run out the Harvester here. And then I think, you know, we could potentially crack the Blood Token, but having the Blood Token around is really important in case we draw Cruelty of Gix. Oh, wow, we got an Assemble. That's huge. So now we have a way to get back a Traxxas, unless they have, you know, Corpse Appraiser Even if they have a single Corpse Appraiser, we can still use Assemble to get back an Hourglass Coven. So we finally found a Reanimation spell, which is really huge. Wow, looks like we've got it. Wow. I don't want to say things too soon, but if we waited any longer, I think we're in real trouble here, because we are getting, down to 7 when there's an active Rusko in play is pretty scary. I mean, thankfully, the other nice thing about getting a Traxxas back here potentially... Oh, wow, we just dead. Wait, hold on. Do we stabilize at 1 here? Yikes. Okay. So maybe we should have taken out the Rusko instead of the Reflection, but... Again, I feel like if they ever find a Bloodtithe Harvester or a Corpse Appraiser, they just run away with the game. Wow, we didn't find any removal. That's really rough. So if we'd found an Abrade or something like that, we would have been potentially fine. I mean, now I think... this is rough. I think we're forced to... we could go Cruelty of Gix to spin again. Discard the Atraxa to the blood token and then Cruelty of Gix. I mean, at least this way we can potentially try and find a removal spell here. Wow, we found a Braid. Hold on, wait a second. Do they have a Rusko in their graveyard? They do, don't they? So we can go Cruelty of Gix, reanimate their Rusko, get a Midnight Clock, and then... use a Braid to take out their Rusko, and then we go back up to 2. So as long as the opponent doesn't have another Rusko or an Invoke Despair, or I guess a Shieldred as well also does it, then I think we might have a chance at stabilizing here. We need to just basically survive for 1 turn here. I guess if they kill the Atraxa, that also buys them some time, but if we can find any non-creature spells off the top, that starts buffering our life total off the Rusko. So this turn is going to be huge. If they can't kill the Atraxa, I think we actually start swinging this game back in our favour really heavily. But we'll have to see. Just got to hope they don't have... Oh, wow, that's not a good sign. They can use Corpse Appraiser to help find them stuff, and they can potentially start copying it as well with the Reflection. So really hope they don't find Shieldred, Invoke Despair, or Rusko here. Or I guess even go for the Throat on Atrax is also kind of bad. And, I mean... Wow, that's got to be a good sign, right? That means they're digging. Okay, sweet. If we can connect with this Atraxa, I think we're in pretty good shape here. Okay, sick. So I think we're better off just jamming the Hourglass Coven here, because if this resolves, we basically just completely stable. Oh no, they have Make Disappear. Yikes, okay. And they get to copy the Corpse Appraiser here. I mean... that was a tough play because the other alternative is Bloodtithe Harvester, and that doesn't really do anything, right? Like, the Harvester just commits an extra body to the battlefield. Because now the issue is they can copy the Corpse Appraiser, try and find a removal spell for the Atraxa, and then if they do, we go down to 1. We're forced to block with the Rusko. But I still feel like that was the best play, right? If they didn't have exactly Make Disappear there, we're basically stable. Whereas the alternative, we play around the Make Disappear and we cast the Bloodtithe Harvester. But then all we've done is put a 3-2 into play that doesn't really do much. I mean, we would have had an extra blocker, so we're not just dead to a removal spell off the top. But I feel like our chances of winning are way higher if we go for the Hourglass Coven and they happen to not have that one piece of interaction, than playing it safe and going for the Bloodtithe Harvester, and then we're not that much better off. Wow, okay, they did find the Otawara, so now we're forced to block the Corpse Appraiser with Rusko, and that basically means that we have no way to gain life immediately anymore. So they do lose the Corpse Appraiser here, but... Wow, they have a second one. Okay, so I mean, this game is probably decided by them having that Make Disappear, but I still think on balance... that was probably the right line. I think the chances of us winning the game if we resolve that Hourglass Coven are way higher than the chances of winning the game if we play that safe line. So we did go for the Throat, which means that we do have a line to survive here, right? We can play the Harvester, pass back, and then if the opponent tries to copy the Corpse Appraiser with the Reflection, we can kill the Corpse Appraiser in response, and then we have a blocker for their 2-2, but that just assumes that their hand is like literally nothing else. I mean, we have to go for it. It's our only possible way of winning from this point, but yeah, I'm not optimistic. I mean, the other annoying thing is without running a card like Bitter Reunion, we don't have ways to gain life immediately. If we had a way to, like, you know, reanimate Atraxa and give it haste, it would make spots like this, you know, us have more outs. Okay, they just have go for the throat, so they win there. So that was kind of rough. That was a very close game, though, and I think had we resolved that Hourglass Cove and had they not had Make Disappear there, we probably would have, well, we'd have had a much better chance anyway, so definitely going to bring in the Invoke Despairs here. Initially I was just not sideboarding at all in this matchup, but I think it's usually worth cutting Atraxa, bringing in Invoke Despair. First of all, it's a hedge against Tasha, and second of all, it's just a decent card in the matchup anyway, so I like making that swap. Cutting Atraxa, bringing in Invoke Despair makes the deck much more, well, it basically just gives you an out to Tasha, which is very important, you know. Like I said, I haven't really seen it that much. I don't think it's stock. A lot of, you know, a decent number of Grixis decks are running it in this sideboard, but if Reanimator like this becomes more popular, then I definitely expect Tasha to see more play. So I think bringing in Invoke Despair is probably just a good habit to get into in the Grixis matchup anyway. And if you are worried about Tasha, then cutting Atraxa also makes sense because it's a card you never really want to keep in your hand. You always want to discard it because it's very rare you want to hard, you know, it's hard to get 3 treasures to hardcast it. And so, unlike Hourglass Cove, in which you're happy to just keep in your hand to hardcast, you often want to discard Atraxa early, which then opens you up to being vulnerable to Tasha. You know, I've had spots where I've had to kill my own Blood Tithe Harvester or Crucius even with a go for the throat to stop my opponent getting an Atraxa off the Tasha -2, which is kind of a disaster. So I like generally just bringing in Invoke Despair in this matchup now. But yeah, see how we do this game. So we're on the play, which is obviously great. And yeah, happy to keep this. I mean, in general, I don't really like mulliganing in this matchup because it's very possible the opponent could be bringing in... I've forgotten the name of it. Undercity Plunder, that's the one. And having that when you're on a mulligan is really brutal. Plus, you know, with 4 Fable 4 Crucius, you generally value having a high number of cards in your starting hand just so you have more stuff to filter with. So let's see what the opponent leads on here. Okay, we'll just run it back. So if the opponent does pass... Oh, wow. I was going to say if the opponent does pass with a second mana open, I'm probably not going to run the Crucius out because having it get countered or killed and then the opponent resolving their own Crucius uncontested is a real disaster. Okay, they do have their own Crucius, but we got ours in play first and we have the Invoke Despair here, which is really, really good in spots like this. I mean, the only thing we have to even consider in this spot is something like Spell Pierce, but I very much doubt the opponent's got that against us. I mean, they could do. I've run some Grixis decks in the past that do run Spell Pierce, but it's not very common from my experience. So we could use the Abrade, but I think it's just, while the opponent is unlikely to have counter magic open, I'm definitely just going to take this opportunity to get Invoke Despair. Not only kill their, you know, one of the best cards in their deck, but we also get to draw 2, which is huge. Gives us more stuff to filter with the Crucius, so... This opening has been really, really strong from us. Now, I think the focus now is to just really apply pressure and, you know, make the most of this strong start. I mean, again, opponent does have mana for their own Invoke Despair if they have it. Okay, just having a Braid, so that's nowhere near as good as Invoke Despair. And they missed their 4th land, so this game is definitely going our way for sure. Definitely get both these Blood Tithe Harvesters in play, and we just want to start applying as much pressure as possible here. Now, there is potentially an argument to looting away these blood tokens to try and find more gas, but I'm going to wait until the end of the opponent's turn for sure, because we definitely want to have mana open for removal spells to kill something like Crucius, while they use their treasure to cast Shielded, so that tells me they don't have another removal spell. I'm actually not even going to use the treasure to cast the Go for the Throat here. I'm going to wait until my turn to keep that treasure around just for later, because we don't really need to do that. And then I think I'm just going to channel the Sokenzan to apply as much pressure as possible here. You know, puts them down to 5, and then, unless they have a Brotherhood's End or another big creature they're really going to struggle, even if they have another Shieldred, we can force them to block and then abrade it. Okay, so that was like a completely different game, just because the opponent missed land drops, basically. I mean, having said that, we did have a really good start of our own. You know, getting an opposing Crucius with an Invoke Despair that early is really powerful. But yeah, going into game 3, I don't think that's going to happen. Most of the other Grixis decks I've seen tend to be running 26 lands as well, so... chances of these mid-range decks getting stuck on land drops isn't very high, particularly because of cards like Fable and Crucius that basically just dig you towards whatever you need. That's one of the main strengths of running these sorts of decks, right? I tested a bunch of different ideas out initially at the start of the week, some mono red decks and other stuff, and you just felt at such a big disadvantage by not running Crucius or Fable yourself. So yeah, we'll see how it goes on the draw here. Yeah, this hand looks decent. Early interaction. It is a bit annoying having Sulphurous Springs as pain lands, but definitely not going to mulligan this. Right, we've got early interaction, we've got Crucius, we've also got Reanimation, so if we can find any of our Reanimation targets, we should be good. Okay, so I'll run out the Sulphurous Springs and just pass it back. See what the opponent does here. Okay, so I don't think it's worth running out the Crucius here. Like I've said multiple times, if you run out your Crucius into a removal spell and then the opponent casts theirs, you just fall behind so quickly. And I think we have enough lands where we can afford to just not run it out. So this is kind of a risky spot here, because if we miss our next land drop, we are in trouble, right? If the opponent just keeps going draw go and has enough lands, that could be an issue. Now they're in a position where they can go Fable and still hold open interaction, so I really hope we draw a land off the top here. Because then that, a land off the top enables us to go Crucius and still hold open go for the throat. Oh, wow, okay. I mean, we found a land drop, but it's a tapped land, so I don't think, again, we would need to be holding open mana, because if we go Crucius here, they kill it and then go their own, and we can't kill theirs. They just pull so far ahead, so I think we're just going to pass back again. Kind of plays like a control mirror in some ways. It's weird for a mid-range deck, or mid-range mirror matches to be like this. But denying that first Crucius trigger is just so important. So they play Shieldred. We're definitely going to go for the throat that for sure. And then, okay, we found another land, which is nice. And then definitely, now we can go for the Crucius, and I'm not too worried. They could very well have their own removal spell. I kind of expect them to, considering they've just been passing back. But it's not the end of the world. They abrade our Crucius, and then we still have Go for the Throat available for theirs if they do try and cast it. And if they don't, we can still just use the Go for the Throat to take out their Reflection. So we'll see what they do here. I mean, we do also have Assemble from parts, so we can potentially try and reanimate Crucius, which could be pretty nice. They do have Viconia, which could shut that off potentially. So I'm definitely going to go for the Throat Viconia here, because that shuts off our using Assemble from parts. Now, they could very well use Viconia in response to exile stuff from our graveyard, but then that means they have less mana available during our turn. Okay, so they exile Crucius. I think that's the only creature in our graveyard. Be interesting to see if they also exile their own Shieldred here. Okay, they do. Interesting. Okay. So I think now we've drawn a land, we can go Cruelty of Gix and still pay for Make Disappear. Now they could Make Disappear, sacrifice Reflection, but I think I'm alright with that. I don't think we can just afford to do nothing here, because our best play next turn is just go for the Throat Reflection or something, which isn't really that great. So I'm going to go for Cruelty of Gix here. Wow, they let it resolve, and then I think I'm just going to go straight to Chapter 2. And just get an Hourglass Coven. Or, we do have quite a few options here. I think... Yeah, I think I'm just going to go for Hourglass Coven. And now we have an actively good play for next turn. Plus, at worst, we can, we can Cruelty of Gix to get back Viconia as well. Which isn't the most high impact play, but getting to Tutor an Hourglass Coven when we basically had nothing. I'm very glad we didn't play too scared there, because if we had, we'd have just been passing back with Go for the Throat available. I feel like it's this sort of spot where you have to do something with your mana to try and get a foothold in the game. And so now if the opponent doesn't stop this Go for the Throat, we can actually use Cruelty of Gix to get back Crucius, which is even better than Viconia now. Okay, 6. So we get to get back their Crucius, unless they have like a Rotten Reunion or something. And now I'm pretty happy to just jam the Hourglass Coven here, because even if they have a counter spell, we can still assemble from parts it next turn. Wow, they didn't resolve. I wonder what they have in hand. Maybe just removal? Okay, so I'm definitely going to get the one to make 1/1 so that we can play more easily around Invoke Despair if they draw it off the top. And then none of these are great. Like, the Menace one is good if you want to start applying pressure, but the opponent's still at 20. I think it's between that and the mill one, though. You know, the one that mills and exiles is only really good against other graveyard decks, or if you can get them in multiples. If you can get it in multiples, you can actually use it to mill opponents out. That's happened to me a couple of times so far, but it's not great on its own. Wow, they cycle a Xander's Lounge. So from how they've played, maybe they've just got a lot of lands in hand, because they haven't really done that much impactful in the past few turns. Unless maybe they've got an Invoke Despair in hand. Oh, they got Brotherhood's End. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So they wanted us to develop to the board to then use it. And they have a Shieldred. I mean, I don't mind because they're tapped out now, right? We can assemble from parts Hourglass Coven and Cruelty of Gix to get a go for the throat. I mean, I think I'm just going to wait on the assemble from parts, though. Oh, wow. Okay, I was going to say I want to wait on the assemble from parts because I was going to Cruelty of Gix to get a go for the throat to kill the Shieldred, and then I didn't want them to potentially Corpse Appraiser the Hourglass Coven that I targeted with assemble from parts. But since we drew the Invoke Despair off the top, that's so much better. And now we can actually go for assemble this turn as well. So that was huge. But even if we hadn't top decked that Invoke Despair, like I said, we could have gone Cruelty of Gix Chapter 2, get a go for the throat. Sorry, I just need to decide what I want to do here. Okay, opponent just scoops it up. Nice. We got there.